Hello, and welcome to live programming here at the More Freedom Foundation. I am psyched to be here. There may or may not be new people here. So I just want to point out this is not like the big public live chats. This is more of a conversation. We're going to go through a sort of news brief format. I've got 10 things I want to talk about here. So I'm going to just talk about each one of them one by one, and then I'm going to dive right into the comments and see what you guys have to say about each of these items. If you don't have anything to say about these items, we'll move on to the next item. But if you do have something you want to say, I mean, we can spend 20 minutes talking about this, a given item. We can spend 2 minutes talking about a given item. It's up to you guys. I am super psyched that I think we had 6 people waiting here, which is a lot. And now we're down to 3. It's inexplicable what the patrons choose to do, but this is the patrons live chat, patrons only live chat. So we will dive in. Even if that number goes down below 3, I'm going to keep going because this needs to be available for the other patrons who check in. I've really like the way that it's slowly crept up over the time that I've been doing these live chats. This is the 5th, I believe, and the first one was seen by 15 people, and now we're up to 50 people who do eventually check in and watch this. So I'm psyched that it seems to keep going, keep growing strong. Gosh darn it! So Mert is here. Mert had a specific point on the Nagorno-Karabakh question that I meant to reread and did not. Mert, if you could just let me know what that is in the chat, I will get there. So Nagorno-Karabakh is the first, or Nagorno-Karabakh. The pronunciation of Nagorno-Karabakh is, I think, something that probably every single Western commentator gets wrong in a different way. I've been watching a lot of videos and commentary on this, and I really meant to look into the appropriate pronunciation of Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan before I did this, but I did not. I'm not even going to pretend to be able to pronounce the name of Nikol Pashinyan's predecessor. Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to pretend to be able to do that. So what I want to talk about today was the greatest tragedy of Nagorno-Karabakh, and that can seem a little arrogant or wrong, but what I mean by greatest tragedy, I don't mean tragedy in this is the most horriblest thing that's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh or has ever happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. I think I'm just going to go with Nagorno-Karabakh. It doesn't mean I'm talking about the most horrible thing that has ever happened there, is happening there this year, or is ever going to happen there. I mean the most tragic thing, and really in the Greek sense, where there's a tragic flaw that undermines legitimately, I'm actually going to say it, legitimately kind of heroic figure in a way that destroys almost certainly himself and quite possibly aspects that are really important to the Armenian people. So the thing about Armenia that I've come to appreciate over the past couple weeks of sort of diving in on engaging with Armenian people, I think mostly Armenian diaspora people, is that the job of running Armenia is incredibly difficult. It is horrifically difficult, and it is horrifically dangerous. I think Nikol Pashinyan is the 3rd or 4th prime minister since Armenian independence, something like that. Also, the politics of Armenia have been somewhat fluid. So, the big man in Armenian politics in a given year or a given decade might not actually be the prime minister because these politics are so fluid. And of the 3 or 4 Armenian prime ministers, one of them left office because he was gunned down by a group of men with AK-47s in the Armenian parliament building, where 5 or 6 politicians were killed. This is, I think, in the late 90s. It is a tough job. It is Armenia is a poor place. It is supported by a wealthy diaspora, but what that wealthy diaspora is most interested in isn't necessarily, I'm sure they put in some charitable money, isn't necessarily the success, the economic success, the prosperity of the country. What they're most interested in is Nagorno-Karabakh and sort of holding on to what they perceive to be this sort of last, bastion of their traditional land that they must hold on to. So, I mean, just the forces working on the Armenian president are very difficult. I think it's important to point out, like, it's really interesting, this disconnect between sort of the popular, something that I'm getting into a little more, something that I fell into a bit as well with my first video on Nagorno-Karabakh, is like, it's very easy to look at this conflict and be like, OMG, look at these horrifically, historically oppressed Armenians being beat up by these nasty Turks. I've made a couple of videos that I hope most of you have seen, that I made at least the most recent video on Tuesday that sort of tries to push back on that a little bit. To be clear, Azerbaijan is in the wrong here. They launched this attack. They need to stop it. I'm delighted to see the ceasefire that seems to have taken place, I guess, yesterday evening, this morning. I don't know how likely it is to persist. Make that very clear. However, I've learned more and more that Azerbaijan has something to complain about here. And I think that that's the disconnect between the popular vision of this, which is Kim Kardashian being like, stop this genocide, and the sort of general sense of things on Twitter, and in the balance of the YouTube comments, and what experts who actually look into this and have actually dived in a bit are just like, yeah, like, Azerbaijan kind of has a point here. Like, and this comes out in just the confusion between what Nagorno-Karabakh actually is. Nagorno-Karabakh is the autonomous region that has been 85% Armenian for a century, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that exists. But half the people I've found myself having conversations with on Twitter think that everything that Armenia occupies is Nagorno-Karabakh. That's not the case. So it is true that this Armenian government is a small country that is attempting to occupy a significant part of a neighboring country that is more populous and has managed to become richer and richer over the past couple decades. So this is an incredibly difficult job for whoever is leading Armenia. You're stuck between, the rock of Azerbaijan and Turkey, rock in the hard place of Azerbaijan and Turkey. But on the other side, you've got the popular wishes of the Armenian people to an extent, and I think to a larger extent, the Armenian diaspora, who gives you what little money you have to run the place, who are just vehemently angry and indignant about their rights to a place that they don't necessarily have rights to. The parallel that kept coming up for me was, I think Israel-Palestine doesn't work in a lot of ways, but was actually the French position in Algeria. France is supposedly, it's a country with a 2-century Republican tradition and something like representative democracy, however chaotic it's been. But when France was trying to hold on to Algeria, with, a million French people, a million European descended French people who had been there for 100 years. When they were trying to do that, like, it drove France, the entire, country of what at that point, 50, 60 million people, it drove it insane. France almost lost its representative democracy in the 60s because of those million people in Algeria. Because the military, assumed that, like, it had the right to do things to defend, Algeria, which was totally France. And so that's the parallel that makes the most sense to me. So if France couldn't stay democratic during this, trying to deal with this kind of situation, terribly poor, terribly small Armenia, wasn't going to either. And that's the thing, because if you look, and this is something that's absolutely true today. If you look, Armenia is a place that can be fairly characterized as a representative democracy with serious democratic aspects to it. That's been true for 2 years. So it is true in 2020 that Armenia is a democracy-ish place that has been attacked by Azerbaijan, which is a dictatorship. But that's been true for 2 years. And the guy who drove that is Nikol Pashinyan. And so this is the tragedy that I see in the Greek sense. It's that I am just as, I am against Azerbaijan, the actions that Azerbaijan has taken this month. But, the more I look at it, the more I learn, I see that there's more dimensions to it. I'm always for democratization. I'm always for, the people in the streets against the regime, or this, that, and the other thing. But I also am aware that like Armenia's special situation, where the person who's in charge there has to somehow balance all of these interests. It's not a great place for a Democrat. So the guy it's Serge Sargsyan or something, the guy who ran Armenia for a decade before Pashinyan came to power in 2018, and I think arguably had power behind the scenes for the decade before that. I've seen I think these are conspiracy theories, could be completely unsubstantiated and ridiculous. But I have seen conspiracy theories that say that maybe the guy that Pashinyan replaced had a big role in the assassination of whoever was in charge in the late 90s. That could be complete bullshit, scurrilous, unmentionable trash. But still, like, this is a guy who had been, powerful in front of the scenes, behind the scenes, and he was a strong man. He was a strong man. And in Armenia's like horrific situation where, they had used an advantage that they had in the mid 90s to take an advantage over a much larger neighbor that most of the world recognizes as kind of illegal and unrecognized, and then watched that larger neighbor get stronger and stronger because of oil and gas money and spend more and more. I mean, that's a horrifying situation. So the person, the strongman who was in charge before Pashinyan, had to balance not just the diaspora, the nationalist wishes of the Armenian people, also had to not offend Azerbaijan enough that Azerbaijan just invaded with its superior military forces. And the thing is, now to be clear, yes, like Azerbaijan did this to an extent because they felt they had bigger support from Turkey than they had in the past. And that's true. But they also did this because Nikol Pashinyan had violated the terms of, not the peace deal, but the terms of negotiations in ways that the strongman before him never did. The strongman before him, when the diaspora and the Armenian people told him, you should be doing more to recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as a republic, you should be doing more to help them declare independence, The strongman could say objectively, yeah, hey, if I do that, we're going to get our asses kicked. I'm not going to do that. And the people in Armenia who are telling me I have to do that in really public ways, I'm going to put them in jail, or I'm going to get their family fired, or I'm going to kill them. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying that I know for sure this guy was killing people, but I do know that he had more strongman levers to pull and could keep things in line. Nikol Pashinyan, and I think I mentioned it very briefly, but at the end of the day, Armenia is a small country. It's a very small country. But I do believe in some video, I couldn't track it down, I mentioned it sort of in passing. Oh, actually, I think in the the growing, democracy is not dying video from 2 years back. So I think I mentioned how Armenia had a really inspiring democratic revolution in 2018, where the people took to the streets. They kicked out this old strongman who'd been powerful for a decade, maybe 20 years, like a decade open, and 10 years before that. They took to the streets. It was a democratic revolution. Pashinyan was installed. And unlike in a lot of other places, he was very quickly affirmed by a real democratic plebiscite. And it was, magical, and it was great. Like, it was democracy, like, finally coming to this region in the Caucasus where it's very hard to find. I mean, Georgia definitely has got, democracy with problems, probably further along than Armenia, but but it was just inspiring, and it was great. I'm getting goosebumps just talking about how cool it was when Pashinyan came to power. And because he was more democratic, he couldn't do the bullshit balancing act that the strongman before him was able to do with balancing the requirements of the Armenians and the requirements of the Azerbaijanis. He had to be more honest in laying out what Armenia's real position was, which was no, Azerbaijan is never getting this territory back. They're not only are they not getting the autonomous region that most people think should be autonomous and controlled and quasi-connected to Armenia, depend, the what it actually looks like should vary. Not only does Armenia not want to give that back, which nobody thinks it should give back, they also don't want to give back the 7 surrounding territories that they ethnically cleansed 600,000 Azeris from, and they want that to be part of Armenia now. So he had to, because he was more democratic, Nikol Pashinyan had to do what the Armenian people wanted to do and say what they wanted to say, which was completely unacceptable to the much larger, much more wealthy country whose land they were occupying. So that's what I see is the greatest, like in the Greek sense, tragedy of this Nagorno-Karabakh thing is like, and yes, again, like it is Erdogan, Erdogan's support for Azerbaijan that is part of the reason why this happened. But the casus belli, the reason why, once you get off Twitter and like look at a lot of the international folks who've been trying to solve this for a long time, the reason why they're all sort of like, well, if Armenia actually gets attacked, we'll do something, guys. But because in March of I think it was March of this year, which led to a smaller conflict in July, Nikol Pashinyan abandoned what was a lie. But there are a lot of lies in diplomacy. He abandoned the lie that Armenia was ever going to voluntarily give up any of the territories, including the territories that, 4 times as many Azeris as there are in Nagorno-Karabakh had been ethnically cleansed from in the 1990s. And he did that because he was more democratic than any leadership that Armenia had ever had before. And that's to me, that's just like, oof, that is real Greek tragedy. Anything else? Mert, you had something else you wanted me to, you on Patreon, you asked me something about this and I don't have it in front of me and I don't want to interrupt the flow enough. If you could ask your question about Turkey and Nagorno-Karabakh, Mert, that would be great. We have Logo Cool Extreme is first. Well done. Black Metal Silly is, here. So folks are here all the time. Look, it says someone messaged Scott and Gelid. I just emailed Scott. He's got the link. Scott's here. Good. Mert is here. 9 viewers. My gosh, I'm honored. This is extraordinary. 9 patrons here at once. This is quite a great group. Scott Locke said, impossible for me to be against tiny Armenia fighting so hard. And they seem to be holding off the Azeris. It's very interesting because we don't know, Scott, like if they are holding off the Azeris. I think I said this on Twitter just recently. I don't think, despite what Azerbaijan says, I think the Azeri leadership has got to recognize that if they actually, they'll shell Stepankert, just as the Nagorno-Karabakh folks are shelling a range of Armenian cities. But I think they've got to recognize that if, Azeri troops actually went into civilian areas of Nagorno-Karabakh and started, even if they didn't kill a single civilian and, started putting people on buses and sending them to Armenia, the optics of that, the horror of that would be too reminiscent of anything. Like, I don't think they actually ever wanted to do that. But this comes to this fundamental misconception where people assume that Azerbaijan is attacking the Nagorno-Karabakh that is 85% Armenian for a century and now 100% Armenian. That is not what they are attacking yet. They are shelling that, but as far as like serious ground troop movement, that's happening in the regions that are outside of that autonomous district. So we don't know because Azerbaijan isn't being honest about this. Armenia isn't being honest about this. But I think there are credible reports that Azerbaijan has taken what used to be serious cities or towns or villages in the 7, or just one, I think it's Jabrail or something like that, which is a serious town in that formerly populated used to be Azeri region that surrounds Nagorno-Karabakh. So while, yes, of course, there are no, the front line hasn't moved at all in onto Nagorno-Karabakh, despite the horrific shelling of civilian territories in Stepanakert and Shusha and other places. However, because we just don't think of those 7 territories, because very consciously, in a lot of the online propaganda, they don't mention the 7 territories that surround Nagorno-Karabakh at all. People aren't really connecting because you don't have these nasty visuals of Armenians being put on buses, like, or something like that. People aren't connecting that there's this vast wasteland where it is a tremendous victory by Azerbaijan if they take any of it. And I think it's very clear that they have taken significant amounts of it. We don't know how much. There are people on Twitter from Azerbaijan claiming they've, taken vast swaths. But I think it is credibly established that they have taken a number of villages and towns and have significantly changed the facts on the ground. I really hope that they have changed the facts on the ground enough for Armenia to come back to the negotiating table, or for Pashinyan to come back to the negotiating table. I do have to tell you, and this is, as I said, the incredible tragedy of Nagorno-Karabakh, is that if Armenia, which may already be happening as we speak, is forced to make any concessions, not in Nagorno-Karabakh, the district that is Armenian and most people think deserves autonomy, if Nikol Pashinyan has to make any concessions at all in those 7 territories that Armenia has, those 7 are Azerbaijani, used to be majority Azerbaijani territories that Armenia has occupied for the past 30 years. If Pashinyan has to make any concessions on that, then Armenia's democratic experiment is probably over, as with Pashinyan's career. I would hope that Armenia has made it far enough that he'll escape with his life, but he'll probably have to, go live. He won't be able to live in LA either. He'll have to go live in the United States or something. So yeah, that's just an incredible tragedy. Okay. Okay, Mert has asked this question. That's good. Let me go back to the top here. Okay. Yes, I am. Yeah, great. Thank you, Mert. That's exactly what I was thinking of. I was thinking of your post on Patreon on the Biden camp's continued criticism of Turkey and Eastern Mediterranean. Yeah, I will discuss that. I'll discuss that right now. So the Biden has released a policy statement that was very unfriendly to Erdogan and Turkey. I look at that and I see that as, my reaction to that was, it could have been a lot worse. It's key to acknowledge, and maybe I haven't done as good enough a job of it in my videos, but Erdogan's, some would say rampage, I would say there are positive aspects. I really do think that Erdogan and Turkey did legitimate good in Libya, and I'm pleased with that. I think what they're doing in Syria is a really bad idea. I think what they're doing in Azerbaijan, not that I've come to appreciate Azerbaijan's position more and more. As I pointed out in Tuesday's video, I think Turkey inserting itself into that situation is actually worse for Azerbaijan than it is for Armenia. So I'm very against that. And obviously, I think the Greek, the bullshit in the East Med, like Greek stuff is while I do believe Turkey has rights there, I don't agree with the way it was asserted. So this whole galaxy of Erdogan's foreign policy adventuring has been made possible by Trump being like, I don't care, and Washington, D.C. just being in extraordinary disarray. I don't think that like Biden's going to come in and all of a sudden everything's going to be rolled back. No, but I think that Erdogan's sort of just general attitude and sort of eager looking for more problems will have more consequences in the Biden administration. And this past week, Biden sort of issued a first communique. And I think looking at that, I don't see real consequences yet. I think it's very possible that there will be real consequences. There's a lot of tone-deaf bullshit. I think he made some kind of proclamation on the Hagia Sophia thing, which is absolutely ridiculous, as I've covered on this channel. I too think it's a real shame that Hagia Sophia is now a mosque instead of a museum. Supposedly they're going to do both. We'll see. However, it must be 100% clear that these questions are for Turkey to resolve. Turkey took that that land and that structure 500 years ago. And for somebody who's going to be a prospective US president saying, oh, no, you can't do that, they should change it back to a museum, is horseshit. These decisions are 100% for the Turks to make. I would be happier personally, deferring completely to the decisions that the Turkish people choose to make. I would be happier personally. I think it makes more sense and says better things about the trajectory of Turkey in the world if it stayed exclusively as a museum. But that's Turkey's decision to make. And for Biden to put out this communique where he's making dictates is insane. However, I think the reason he put it there is because that communique, read as a whole, has got a whole lot of nothing. They were talking about selling, the other thing that sounded really crazy was selling lethal arms to Cyprus, not to the part of Cyprus that claims to be part of that, not to the Turkish part of Cyprus, but to the Greek part of Cyprus. And that sounded very aggressive, but like, I mean, that's basically just a way to make money. It's not like there's going to be any world where the Greek Cypriots pick fights with the the thousands of representatives of the Turkish military that are present on this Cypriot island. That's not going to happen. This is just a way to make money. I think it is potentially getting in the way of a resolution of the Cyprus crisis for sure, which some folks reached out to me to point out that was actually a lot closer than you might think before the recent kerfuffle. But yeah, so I think that the Biden's talking shit about Hagia Sophia was a way to cover up for the fact that his communique had essentially nothing. I do, however, think that there will need, and there's a question of whether Captain Ottoman Slap knows this and will be able to calculate this appropriately. There definitely needs to be less Turkish aggression. Aggression. Turkish, less Turkish intervention abroad for sure, and a more relaxed I don't want to say deferential, but a more relaxed attitude and a lot of that depends, like whether that's going to work out is like, how does Biden choose to handle Syria? I mean, it's interesting stuff. I gotta say, like, so one of my really established positions on this is that sort of the plot against Turkey is failing. There are too many business relationships with Turkey, and Turkey doesn't have any oil to steal. So the chances of Washington, D.C.'s lunatics being able to create a situation where Turkey is attacked by the United States have always been very, very slim. I do have to say, and I think I made this very clear in my first Nagorno-Karabakh video, and I still believe this very firmly, the Armenia issue is real delicate, and it's especially if there's any Turkish support for like Azeri bombing of Yerevan or any kind of attack on Armenian territory that's internationally recognized to be Armenian. That's a game changer. That's incredibly dangerous for Turkey. That's a real bad thing to do. And it's been fascinating just seeing leaders in the Democratic establishment on Twitter talking about the Republic of Artsakh. The Republic of Artsakh is sort of Nagorno-Karabakh's name for itself that always includes the Azeri territories, not just Nagorno-Karabakh. It's always, including the Azeri territories that Armenia occupies. So it was just, Adam Schiff put out something talking about the Republic of Artsakh, which was just like, what the fuck? But that's because he's from California, which is where, there's tremendous power for the Armenian diaspora. This is not like, even more with the Greeks, where it's acknowledged that there's no chance of actual conflict between Turkey and Greece. It's just not going to happen. I'll get to that later. Even there, whatever. But like with the Armenians, it's real delicate. It's not something that Erdogan should be fucking with. So Mert, I do think that there's going to be some serious sort of emotional or behavioral shifts in the U.S.-Turkish Biden-Erdogan relationship, or Harris-Erdogan relationship. Who knows how long Biden will last? But I think if Erdogan is smart and sort of backs off a little, then I don't think there's necessarily going to be any larger consequences, though there might be. Congress is filled with a lot of stupid people, and one of the only things they can motivate to get together to do is to pick out a country somewhere that they hate, and whine about sanctions or something, because that's easy for them to do with no consequences, especially if there's a diaspora that wants that really badly. So yeah, I do see that beginning to develop in the Congress. So especially related to this Armenian thing. So I don't know. I hope I answer that question. Black Metal, you can let me know if I answer that question, Mark. Black Metal Silly says, I got the British Empire book delivered a month ago and finished it about a week ago. Great work. Well, thank you. I assume that most folks who are patrons have some kind of exposure to my book, Avoiding the British Empire. But one of the nicest things about COVID is that a lot of people have actually been reading it after buying it. And how folks have reacted. If you have read it and you have not gone to Amazon and put a positive review on there, I'd be very grateful if you did, because that's a huge part of how I sell more books. Thank you so much for saying that, Black Metal Silly. Scott Lux, impossible for me to be against tiny Armenia fighting so hard, and they seem to be holding off the Azeris. I understand that completely, and when I don't know, Armenia itself is actually attacked, I will be very, very sympathetic to the Armenians, and I think I've made it pretty clear that I think Azerbaijan should not be. War is bad. Killing people is bad. Despite the history of it, this year, the reason that people are dying in Nagorno-Karabakh is a conflict that Azerbaijan initiated, and that is bad, and should not be done. Fadel says, hi. Logo Cool Extreme says, when you say ethnically cleansed, do you mean purged from the location, like the Kashmiri Pandits, or purged like the Uyghurs? It's an interesting thing that these terms, and I think that certainly the range of opposition to Turkey is very guilty of this. What happened to the Armenians was a genocide in 1915. Armenian genocide is real, but there's absolutely an inflation of not an inflation. Wait, so crap. I've locked my brain thinking about currency, but there's been a sort of inflation or deflation of the value of because when a currency inflates, the value deflates anyway. But there's been a deflation of the value of the term genocide in recent years. This idea that genocide and ethnic cleansing, I think, is similar. My understanding of ethnic cleansing is that it includes killing and or expulsion of people. So when I talk about the ethnic cleansing of the 600,000 Azeris from Armenian occupied territory, there were absolutely massacres to the tune of collectively across the 5-year war, thousands of people. However, like the broader ethnic cleansing, the thing that bothers me the most, obviously murder of thousands of people bothers me, but that happened absolutely on both sides. The 600,000, the ethnic cleansing of 600,000, that is the expulsion, the kicking people out. I think when people talk about the Uyghurs, there's been another concept that's sort of been introduced that I think is a valuable concept, but you've got sort of genocide, and you've got ethnic cleansing, which is not as bad as that, but bad. And you've got cultural genocide, which I think comes under ethnic cleansing, which is, I think, a fair description of what has been done, what is being done to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and I think lower than what's being done to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang by the Chinese is the Saudis, I think, have carried out a form of cultural genocide against the diversity of worldwide Islam. I've talked about that a lot in the Everybody's Lying About Islam series. So, there's this hierarchy of, crimes and horrors, and I think that people are really invested in inflating, a crime up to the next level. So the Armenian genocide, it's something that happened, but what a lot of people do, a lot of people in like the Wall Street Journal or Harvard, academics, etc., will do is they'll say the Armenian genocide was as bad as the Nazi Holocaust, which it absolutely was not. And then there will be people who want, and there are a lot of folks in Armenia right now who want to elevate things that Azerbaijan did too, genocidal to be on the level of the Armenian genocide, which they absolutely aren't. While at the same time saying that the ethnic cleansing um, that they did in the 90s isn't important at all. And it's weird. I mean, I think it's a little crude and unpleasant to play gotcha with people who are legitimately hurt by things. But I got in a sort of argument with a young woman on Twitter last night who, was repeatedly calling me a paid shill for the Azeris or this sort of thing, because I keep mentioning the 600,000 that were ethnically cleansed from Armenian occupied territory. To be clear, during this war, there were tons of people ethnically cleansed and massacred on acknowledged Azerbaijani territory and on acknowledged Armenian territory. That is equal. That is tit for tat. What is not tit for tat, because Armenia won the war, is these 600,000 folks ethnically cleansed. So anyway, I got into an argument with this woman. And it was interesting because, I was saying, like, look, I didn't say that these 600,000 were massacred. I did not say that they were genocide. I said it is ethnic cleansing. That is a distinct thing. And then she started talking to me about Nakhchivan, which is the Azerbaijani enclave, which is on the other side of Armenia on the map, which is very confusing, which went through nasty ethnic cleansing processes in the 1920s. I do not believe, as most Armenian nationalists assert, that it was majority Armenian before the 1920s ethnic cleansings and minor massacres. But what was interesting was, so she'd been castigating me and calling me an Azeri plant for, there's like 50 tweets for pointing out that 600,000 folks were ethnically cleansed. And then she talks about the, I believe, much smaller numbers of Armenians that were ethnically cleansed from Nakhchivan 100 years ago, and calling that genocide. So it's just like, these terms are dangerous. And I wouldn't have this, frankly, I wouldn't have this conversation about this on a public thing. I'm doing this with patrons who are, more or less on my side and don't think I'm a monster. I actually have written hundreds of words of scripts talking about the Armenian genocide, why I believe it happened, why, but also why the Turks have a point when they claim that it is unfairly used as a bludgeon against them. And I've got, like, in my mind, like, mental grab, like, is the Nazi Holocaust as bad as the Armenian genocide, or the genocide of the Native Americans, or the how do the Rohingya fit in here? And, like, it's a fun, like, intellectual thing, but I sort of step back and look at these scripts. Like, it looks like I'm going to be, if I put these scripts out there, I'm going to be the guy who, like, is explaining away the Armenian genocide. And that's not really that's not who I want to be. So I just can discuss that on this stuff on the patrons only live cast. I'm not going to discuss it in public. So anyway, wow, man, we got 9 more things to get through, and we spent 40 minutes on Nagorno-Karabakh, but that's what folks want to talk about. So that's what we're talking about with 12 patrons here. Grateful. Okay. Local cool streamer. Also, this conflict has seen the usage of high-tech suicide drones by the Azeris. Could this be the future of the next Cold War? Who has the advantage here, the U.S. or China? That's an excellent question. At the end of this year, when I put up a poll asking you guys what I want to cover, one of them is, it's probably going to be Israel-Palestine. The choices are probably going to be Israel-Palestine, India-Pakistan, or the U.S. military-industrial complex. Like, I really do want to get a little more knowledgeable about technology. Like, at this point, with what little I know, I'm 100% certain that aircraft carriers are completely useless. According to what some folks are saying on Twitter, it's beginning to look like, because of the weaponized drones that Logoco Extreme are mentioning, that those tanks that probably cost a couple, the tanks that the Armenians, the Azerbaijanis are using, very expensive piece of equipment. I'm sure that the tanks that the United States put out, cost tens of millions a pop and involve development processes of hundreds of billions. And it is an open question because of stuff that we've been seeing, I think also in the Libyan and Syrian battle space, but also especially with this conflict where Armenia and Azerbaijan are both fielding, big, like, World War II looking, not size, but, World War II set, military paradigms. Like we're putting out tanks and artillery and this, that, and the other thing. In that context, like we're realizing just how murderous these suicide drones are against tanks. They've just been, I mean, there's a lot. The tank is actually a bad place to be in this conflict going forward. So that opens questions like, oh, is the entire U.S. Army's tank program, like the U.S. Navy's entire aircraft carrier program, just a colossal waste of money, creating, billion-dollar death traps? That's a very interesting question, and something I definitely want to investigate further. But yeah, that requires a lot more research that I have yet to do. Okay. Oh, and yeah. So, what are the implications for this with the U.S. and China? Oh man, that's a very interesting, very big question. Yeah. I think that what this absolutely should have direct impact for is Taiwan defense procurement, less giant anti-missile systems, and just more cheap, nasty drones that can fly into Chinese troop ships. I think that's probably the most important thing. And yeah, that also is big, nasty anti-missile, stupid, expensive U.S. anti-missile systems too, that may or may not work. Mert Miftuil says, I read the tech of suicide drones are of Israeli tech. Yeah, that's another interesting aspect of this conflict, is that the Israelis are very much heavily supporting and on the side of the Azerbaijanis. I don't know that they're not like being like, yeah, go Azerbaijan, ethnically cleansed Nagorno-Karabakh or anything, but they're selling a lot of the equipment that's being used. And presumably that comes with some diplomatic support as well. So that may be another reason why the U.S. is sort of like, maybe we'll put out a strongly worded communique in a week or two. Okay. Black Metal Silly says, at what time in recent history would have Lincoln resigned from the party of Lincoln? Or if the guy would be around now, would he be in the MAGA camp? Maybe related to the next topic on the agenda. Now, I think realistically, like any man from the 19th century who, dropped into 21st century America would probably be in, some kind of, deranged religious fundamentalist, heavily armed camp somewhere in Utah. There are many figures of which we would like to believe that wouldn't be true, and Lincoln, of course, would be foremost of that. But I can't think of any person. Gosh, I can't think of any cherished figure from 50 years ago who wouldn't. And that's not because the U.S. has gotten evil and progressive. Like that's just how history works. Things change dramatically. That's why one of the reasons I'm so suspicious and uncharitable to interpretations put forward by folks on any side who are like, oh, this land has been ours for thousands of years. It's like, if you've managed to, hold on to the paperwork and, not have anybody else take it from you, I'm a little more interested because, from people from, my beloved father, who's quite, in his late 70s, is already living in a world that he does not recognize at all. So realistically, I think that Lincoln would probably be some kind of far beyond, like way weirder than MAGA or QAnon, as would any politician from the 19th century drop today. But yeah, realistically, I think that. I think the real interesting question is what would Lincoln think of the end of Reconstruction? I think that would Lincoln have been a fan of Reconstruction? So lately Reconstruction has gotten very popular. So what happened in the direct aftermath of the Civil War? So I believe it was crazy. I saw this recently. I think it was within a week of the signing of the treaty at the Appomattox Courthouse. Or the surrender of Robert E. Lee. Within a week, I believe, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated at the Ford Theater. Andrew Johnson. whoever his vice president was actually quite sympathetic to the South, not much of a fan of the idea that the South should be radically reshaped. And for a year or so, he was the first U.S. president who was impeached but not removed. For the years that were left of Lincoln's term, the president that the vice president that became president actively helped the South reinstall legal systems that were very, very close to slavery. And he became such a hated figure for this that what were called the radical Republicans came in and were able to, through their power in the Congress, gosh, I can't even recall. I think, was Grant a Republican or a Democrat? Sorry. But through the power that the radical Republicans had and the hatred of Lincoln's direct successor, who came to power because of Lincoln's assassination, we got something that's called Reconstruction. And Reconstruction, I think quite rightly, has always had a very positive reputation. And what happened was for about 17 years, it's 17 years, six in my head, the South was occupied by the North, and I believe the 13th and 14th Amendment came through here. Real voting rights were given to freed slaves. You had African American congresspeople and senators, I believe, taking serious participation in these governments. It went on for about 15 years, and then part of a shady deal that installed a Republican president after the radical Republicans had sort of faded away. Reconstruction was ended. The Northern occupation left, and very quickly the system that became known as Jim Crow was installed through racist terrorism, a number of horrific laws, and it's just really nasty. So I think it would be tempting to say that Lincoln would have left the Republican Party when the Republican Party gave up on Reconstruction in the late 1870s. I think it's tempting to say that, but I'm not 100% sure, given I haven't read a Lincoln biography in a while. I mean, this guy, we sort of see him as an American Moses, and I think that absolutely he's probably the only unimpeachably positive. I mean, he's a secular saint. He's extraordinary what he was capable of doing. But he was also a consummate and extraordinarily successful politician. What allowed him to be elevated to the extent that he was extraordinarily difficult times, and the ability to use his extraordinary political powers to solve an extraordinary wrong that's at the base of my country. If he'd gotten to the end, maybe Lincoln would have been just fine with what his vice president did. Like, slavery's over, not our problem. Let the Southerners do whatever the fuck they want. Who knows? Maybe he would have seen the radical Republican reconstruction of the South as too much or too far. Maybe he would have wanted to hold on to power in the Republican Party no matter what happened. He's a politician. And after he'd sort of made incredible progress on this crime. So maybe who knows? If Lincoln had lived all the way through, maybe he'd have been a big fan of Reagan. It's hard to say. That's a fascinating question. Thank you, and I probably spent too much time on it. Okay. Media, Israel sold them drones and other high-tech stuff. Yes, Israel has been supplying the Azeri military. Miftia says, yeah, the Hagia Sophia conversion to mosque was a low move. It was a way for Erdogan to boost his standing internally. Yes, I think it was stupid, and I think it's sad, and it says sad things about Turkey. However, it is 100% within Turkey's right to do it. And neither the Greek government nor the U.S., the presumptive U.S. president, should be making commentary on it, other than to say it's a shame, but the Turks can do what they want. Okay. Logan said it was nothing more than Erdogan putting a sign on the outside of Hagia Sophia and calling it a mosque and calling it a day, just like Trump calling Antifa a terrorist group. Pure theatrics and distraction. I think Loga is right about that, but also, I mean, they are conducting services at least every Friday, I believe, in the Hagia Sophia Mosque. This does require that, in some cases, I believe millennia old artwork needs to be, if not covered up permanently, mucked about with. So yeah, it is absolutely a callow political decision made for short term reasons, but it could have very long term effects. Scott Luck says, yeah, Moscow Museum, who cares? It's not like the building is going to change. I love the Hagia Sophia and I love the Hagia Sophia Museum, and I really I miss it, and it hurts. It hurts me. That it makes me sad that some of the mosaics will be covered up the next time I visit. But yeah, no, I mean it's their right to do what they want, and yeah, absolutely, Scott is absolutely right that it's too much of a it has become too much of an international issue. Black Metal Silly says, thank you for the closing the blinds. I did that. Remember, if you Skylark's sure building is not changing, but I think Turkey hurt the Christian minorities inside. I also think it's a stick to Russia for the ongoing proxy wars. Exactly. It gives Turkey very little. Me true. I think Erdogan will be gone soon, then can change it back. Yeah, I think Erdogan should be gone soon, but we'll see. Zemo5 says, how is this Patreon only? Well, it is Patreon only. White genocide ruined the term. Fidel points out that white genocide ruined the term genocide. Yes, that is true. Logo Cool Extreme. Only patrons get the link to this stream. Oh, Black Metal Silly is distributing the links on the internet. Well, that's unfortunate. What? Oh, that's. I wouldn't want people to be distributing the links on the internet, but I mean, we've only got 12 folks here, so I guess Loga is here, and if people start acting disruptive, then Logo will do the moderating that Logo does. If somebody is distributing the links on the internet, welcome. Please be civil. And yeah, and Loga is here to make sure that you are. But in future, yeah, please don't do that. If somebody wants to send me, reach out to me on Twitter and tell me, give me some documentation of how that was happening. Anyway, Mert Miftuel says, yes, the lira is dropping. It's only a matter of time, I fear, before the cracks in the dam give way. Average folks will suffer significant financial loss. Yeah, I mean, yes, obviously this is meant to be private for patrons only. But if folks have wandered in here who are not patrons, as long as they're civil, I'm perfectly fine with that. And we have got a ton. We're almost an hour through, and we've just been talking about Abraham Lincoln and Nagorno-Karabakh, which is fun. I love that Abraham Lincoln question. Okay, Donald Trump. I've sort of got this caption: beating this dead horse. And I think Scott Lux actually made a good point on YouTube. This ain't over. Trump is acting more and more ridiculous. It's frightening. It's something we've gotten used to. But I mean, it's a deeply unbalanced guy who's probably pretty sick, who's probably on some weird drugs, and he's flailing, and he knows he's losing. And that can make him dangerous. As far as like the big thing that made, and I linked this in the description, the big thing that makes me think that Donald Trump is screwed was a poll that came out from Rasmussen, which is Trump's favorite pollster. Throughout the 2016 election, they were the folks that always had Trump up where everyone else had him down. These are the folks that can fairly be said got the 2016 election right. And they released a poll this week where Biden had 52% of the vote and Trump had 40%. A 12% difference like that is historic. I mean, I mean, historic in the sense that you got to go back to the 20th century to see a blowout that massive. So yeah, that's Trump's favorite pollster. That's the pollster that has always been, fairly openly biased towards Republicans. And I think that I am not a pollster, but my understanding is like the idea that they got 2016 right isn't accurate because Trump did lose the popular vote by 3%, which is I think where a lot of folks had it. But he got the Electoral College. So Rasmussen is unfairly biased towards Republicans to the tune of 5 to 10%, most probably. And they think that Trump is losing by 12%. So I'm pretty damn sure that he's going to lose. So what's interesting, I've got at the end of the list the Durham report, LOL, on the stuff that I was going to talk about. But I think I'll talk about it now because I think, as Scott pointed out, this is connected directly to this is connected directly to the what's the word that I'm saying? This is connected directly to the fact that Trump is losing. So Trump, over the past week or so, has really just gone nuts. Like he's publicly castigating William Barr, his attorney general, and asking him, why isn't he arresting people? Why isn't he arresting Obama or Biden or Hillary Clinton? I mean, it is insane. It is just absolute batshit. Banana Republic is a very problematic term, but yes, it's like third world dictator horseshit that he is pushing right now. But if you are familiar with like the level of discourse, not even with QAnon and crazies, but on Fox News, if you're familiar with that, then it's not actually that surprising. Because for the past year or so, Fox News has really been pushing this idea that Trump was unfairly persecuted by the apparatus of the US government in the election and afterwards. And you know what? That's actually probably true. But it's not because, Obama and Biden and Susan Rice got together and were like, let's fuck the Trumps. The Trumps got fucked because they're stupid. They don't have good lawyers. And most importantly, and something that we should focus on much more, and I assure you, after the election, I am going to be focusing on a lot more, is the fact that the US intelligence community, the US national security state more broadly, is fucking insane. It has been given unlimited power, unlimited money for 20 years, and it thinks it can do whatever the fuck it wants. You know what? Like, they are working very hard to overthrow Trump, nowhere near as hard as he has himself. And I think it will be fair to characterize, but I think it's enough activity by folks affiliated with intelligence communities that is fair to characterize Trump's 2020 loss as something like a coup. However, it is fair to characterize Trump's 2016 victory as very much a coup. James Comey, some fucking way, the FBI director, who basically sunk Hillary Clinton's campaign in the final days of the campaign, has somehow become a resistance hero, which is ridiculous. That is an FBI director, a member of the security services of the barely developed country that is my country, the United States, through the election to Donald Trump. So yeah, this is a little coup-like what's happening to Donald Trump right now. What happened in 2016 was absolutely an FBI coup against Hillary Clinton. So that is deeply, deeply fucked up. However, this is not, and the fantasy that was going on Fox News was that, okay, this horrible thing happened, and because Fox News is constitutionally incapable of admitting that there's something wrong with the national security state, there's something wrong with our military that hates everybody in the world and wants to, murder brown people all over the world. Like, Fox News can't admit that there's something very wrong that started after 9/11, and it didn't start after 9/11, that got a lot worse after 9/11 in this country. Fox News can't admit that. So they see this, 2 elections in a row that have been controlled and fucked with by the US national security state. They can't see that. They can't say that. They take a lot of money from the national security state. So they've focused on Democrats. So what they're engaged in is this fantasy world where they pretend that that this horrible thing that is happening, this horrible corruption, this decay of the United States into like a full-on like Roman Empire Praetorian Guard type situation. They pretend that it's about the Democrats, just like CNN and MSNBC pretend it's about the Republicans, and it's fucking not. So it's what's baked in. What's part of the problem is that if you say national security, there are zero consequences for anything that anybody in the government does. And I don't think that Obama, Biden, I mean, it's very clear that, Obama, Biden, Susan Rice at the top levels were very concerned about the idea that they could possibly be connected to the idea of going after a political opponent, and like wrote minutes and were careful about it. Fucking Trump, because he's an idiot and has bad lawyers, is like, yeah, go after my political enemies, which is, dumb and illegal. What's interesting is that we see this with the Ukraine thing. Trump keeps committing the crimes he thinks the other side are committing, but aren't. Like, you have to be really stupid and really poorly advised to put yourself in a situation where you're a leader in the government and you put yourself in legal jeopardy. Trump has managed to do that. Biden, the Democrats have never been able to do that. So Fox News is obsessed. First, they were obsessed with an Inspector General report. I think it was the DOJ. Don't quote me on that. That came out. There was nothing in it. What they've been obsessed now is the Durham report. There's been this fantasy that William Barr, Trump's way too political attorney general, has appointed well-respected, old-looking white guy with a mustache, something Durham, Connecticut, badass prosecutor. It's funny because it's the exact embarrassing ass flip side to the Mueller hagiography we all put up with. This idea that Robert Mueller was going to take down Trump, which was always horseshit for a lot of the reasons. A lot of the reasons I've discussed before on this program. So Fox News has its own Mueller. It's this guy Durham who's going to put out this report that's going to put Hillary and Biden and Obama in jail. And it's not going to fucking happen. There are no consequences for government abuses in the US system. That's the problem. The idea that you're going to be able to, in this incredibly massive problem, dive in and put together politically motivated prosecutions against popular political figures who are also very good lawyers and have good lawyers and are not, like Donald Trump, fucking idiots. So the whole Durham report thing was a fantasy. And what we're seeing right now is the complete breakdown of that fantasy. Do you remember when the Mueller report came out? And Rachel Maddow and everyone was like, oh, well, it shows obstruction. This means I was right, was it? That's what we're getting on Fox News right now with the Durham report, because Durham did find some low-level person in the FBI who might have altered an email at some point in the processing for a warrant in a way that was problematic and has been disciplined. I don't know if he's been fired or if the trial hasn't happened yet, but he might get fired. He may or may not lose his pension. Who knows? That's what we're going to get out of the Durham report. There will be a Durham report. There will be, some kind of description. It's going to be just as boring as the Inspector General report. There will be no legal consequences, certainly for anybody that Fox News pretends was going to get got. So for folks who are not part of the Fox News cinematic universe, are not obsessed with the Durham report, Trump's reaction this week, where he's just sort of yelling into the void, screaming about how Clinton and Obama and Biden should all be arrested. That's his sad ass reaction to the Fox News Mueller report sort of failing and being revealed that it's simply not coming out. So yeah, that's what the Durham report thing is about. That's what the insane Twitter presence and hyperventilating that Trump is doing. That's what that's about. So yeah, I was never confident in Hillary Clinton's victory. I warned repeatedly that Hillary Clinton could lose. I did in June of 2016 record a video saying I think Hillary Clinton's going to lose, and it was too much of a chicken shit to upload it until the day she lost. But you can find that why Hillary Clinton lost. I was never confident in Hillary Clinton's victory. I am not confident. Sorry, I am very confident at this point in Biden's victory. Something can go wrong. Anything can go wrong. Who knows? Biden can die. That's my main concern right now, is Biden dying. The debates were my main concern. Like, what if, Biden shat himself or started drooling or, dropped a racial slur or something in the debates? That could have been the real game changer. In the first debate, Trump, I thought Biden, I was terrified the whole time watching that debate. I thought Biden looked like he was on the edge of, falling apart, but he never fell apart. And even though he looked very impaired, Trump was such a horrific bastard and just a piece of shit that he horrified a country that, most people aren't as sort of brain broke as we are. Like, most people don't spend all their time on Twitter. Most people don't, follow the news all the time. 70 million Americans turned in to see what a disgusting piece of shit our president happens to be in that debate. So he lost that debate. Trump managed to cancel the second debate, both by getting sick and then refusing to do it virtually. So that's fucking great. There's one more debate for Biden to fuck up. And he doesn't have to mildly fuck it up. He doesn't have to be like, I don't know, and start talking about something else. That's fine. That's not a problem. No, like, Biden has to legit drop an N-word or have a heart attack on stage. Like Biden in this one debate that's left, like, Biden has to die or have a psychotic break for Trump to win this election. But yeah, that could happen. Biden could die. He is an old man. I don't think, and I think Loga can attest to this, when an old person has purpose, I think they can live forever, and I think Biden is an old man who has purpose. So I think that we may actually be surprised if this guy is elected at how durable he is. However, we may not. He is a 78-year-old man. Absolutely anything could happen at any point. So that's something to be terrified about. However, I really do believe that Trump's going to lose. So we'll see. Okay. Let's see. Questions. Okay. I am being doxxed. What? What is this? Scott likes, I hope true. I'm a Turkish American. I'm not really excited about continued Erdogan presidency. Makes sense. Mert, I see they're dropping. Seems Erdogan greenlight the Israeli tax is his desperation. Zemo5 says, hey, don't disclose my personal information. Isn't there any kind of rule against disclosing other personal information? Yeah, people shouldn't be disclosing people's personal information. Why is there a problem with people knowing your nationality, though? I don't think anybody's really you're not being doxxed if people talk about your nationality. You're being doxxed if people are putting up your contact information, and people should not be putting people's contact information up here, obviously. Okay. Let's see. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe Logan can explain it to me after the talk. Black Metal Sully says, I'm sorry for this incident. Great. Fado says, could you imagine Trump dying at one of his Yeah, Mert Brookfield puts out about Turkey. Yes, the lira is dropping. It's only a matter of time, I fear, before the cracks in the dam give way. Average folks will suffer significant financial loss. Fano says, could you imagine Trump dying at one of his rallies? Jesus. Unfortunately, I mean, no, not unfortunately. It's really important. I really, really strongly dislike Donald Trump and his political influence, just as I strongly disliked Hillary Clinton and her political influence. I do not wish death on Trump or his family. That is wrong. I wish Trump soon retirement and hopefully a long, quiet life thereafter. So I need to not imagine Trump dying at one of his rallies. I think that, as I just described with Biden, for an old person, the thing that kills old people the most is a lack of purpose. Retirement is the most lethal thing I've discovered. Trump, I think probably one of the most important things helping Trump recover from COVID as quickly as he seems to be I mean, who knows? Not out of the woods yet. Who knows? Is the idea that he's the president of the United States and he's got an election to win. I think that there's nothing worse for a person than not having a reason to be alive and do things. And for a lot of old people in power, being in power is a reason to be alive and do things. While I think it is horrific that we're now governed by a Soviet-style gerontocracy in the United States. You got, Nancy Pelosi in her 80s, Chuck Grassley is almost 90. Like, I mean, these are really powerful people in the U.S. Congress, and the presidential candidates who are way too old to be in power and are visibly declining. But it's the power, and yeah, I want them to go. But the power is probably the main thing keeping these people alive. They can't envision something else to do with their time. And that's very sad. So I don't think Trump will die at one of his rallies, but anything's possible. It's 2020. There's a lot of speculation about the steroids, the dexamethasone. It's just crazy. Logan Cool Extreme says, how do they have bad lawyers? You have money, you idiots. Use it not stupidly for once. You're referring to the Trumps. Yes, that's a great fucking question. The thing is, man, you got to understand, like, New York is a fucked up place, and Trump is more a media figure and a celebrity than he is a business developer at this point. But business development, in real estate development in New York City is a deeply fucked up, super corrupt cesspool. And Trump has always swam in that, and it's always been good enough for him because it's New York, and Trump isn't that rich, and he's super cheap. If he were to pay for actual real, the Democrats, Clinton, Obama themselves are good attorneys, and they went to great law schools, so they don't just have folks they have to pay for. They have their college classmates. They have deep networks of people who want to make the sacrifice long term. And it certainly rounds out the career and the resume to spend a couple of years in a presidential administration. Not this fucking administration. There's plenty of prestigious people who are eager to give free help. Prestigious, knowledgeable, top shelf, first class people who are willing to do legal work for Democrats and Republicans. Absolutely. Not for Donald Trump. He would have to actually pay for those services. So he gets bottom feeders and cheap work and shoddy work. And he's also awful and he's terrible. In 2016, 2017, there were plenty of intelligent, prestigious, Republican-affiliated attorneys with good reputations. That's actually what William Barr used to be, who'd be willing to work for Donald Trump. It's funny, like the amount of stress, I was just reading about this yesterday, the amount of stress between William Barr, Trump's relatively new, and he's been there a year now, I guess, which is, in any administration, a year in power for a figure can be long. Freaking Steve Mnuchin, who has been Trump's Treasury Secretary for 4 years, 4 very stressful years. It's kind of amazing. Barr, he's not so new anymore, the disgustingly Machiavellian. He's actually a pretty good attorney. He's actually somebody who knows what they're doing. And he's actually threatened to resign multiple times over Trump's Twitter feed. There were, like William Barr is an example. There were plenty of good lawyers who were eager to help Trump cover his ass, but he's just an idiot. And he's lived by the seat of his pants for for decades, and it's worked out for him in a series of tremendously corrupt environments, from New York real estate to the entertainment industry to fucking casinos in Vegas and Atlantic City. Yeah, it's been fine for him. But Washington, D.C. is the big leagues. And Trump is very much a minor league guy, legally, intellectually, and reputationally, and in network terms. That's why he doesn't have good attorneys. I hope that was helpful. Black Metal Silly says, will U.S. political left, center, right be ever aligned to be comparable to European respective left, center, right, center of gravities being at the same place? Zemo05 says no. And I agree. I think, yeah, the answer is no. Yeah, I don't see that happening. I'm afraid. That is not something. I mean, not necessarily afraid. I think diversity is good. The country, countries should be different. I hope and pray that it is now once again time for reorientation in a more like sort of New Deal direction. But the New Deal was something that could. This is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I've got a video up. I think it's the Ronald Reagan versus Joker that sort of explains the past 80 years of political development in the United States very quickly. We had the Reagan. We are living in the Reagan era. The Clintons, even Obama, are very much Reaganites. They're very much intellectual political successors of Ronald Reagan, a Republican president who was president between 1980 and 1988. He sort of set, not just for the United States, but for the world, this sort of neoliberal orientation, pro-business, low tax, let the business handle it, that worked for a while and has now led us to horrible destruction in many respects, but incarnated by Donald Trump. Before Reagan, there was the FDR era, and the FDR era was a very indigenous, very U.S. oriented movement towards more social justice, for lack of a better term, more social provision. That's where Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, there's this reputation the United States has no welfare system at all, and that's not true. It was built by FDR and his successors. FDR was elected in 1932, and sort of the last, I would say, of the FDR folks was Jimmy Carter, though even Jimmy Carter was already sort of pushing in a Reaganite direction. So yeah, like I do think there's a swing left coming. I hope there's a swing left coming. I'm a conservative, but I think it's worth conserving the legacy of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of FDR, the guy who gave us a welfare state and won World War II. I think that it's time for the pendulum to swing back a bit. However, Zamo05 is absolutely right. No, it's not. We're never going back. Local Extreme says, I'm still baffled at how you think Sessions is worse than Barr. Barr is just Sessions with less integrity. I disagree. And my main answer is Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller, for those of you who are not as mired in U.S. politics as the rest of us are, is the guy who's destroying U.S. immigration. He's he's very young. But he's the guy who is responsible for pushing a lot of the crushing of legal immigration. I mean, he's the guy. He's the border guy. He's the wall guy. He's someone else like Steve Mnuchin. He's probably like Steve Mnuchin. He's one of the few people who've survived through the entire Trump administration. Stephen Miller is in the Trump administration because of Jeff Sessions. Before he was in the Trump administration, he was a legislative aide to Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions is the person who created Stephen Miller. William Barr is a Machiavellian, morals-free, unethical piece of shit attorney who's all about Republican power and covering up for presidents. He's a terrible person. Jeff Sessions is a racist. And you know what? I think by his lights, he's more principled. He believes in things like the law and the Constitution and doing the right thing. But he also believes that white people are better than black people, and efforts to help black people or people of color more generally undermine the United States in some way. He believes firmly in the United States as a white ethno-state. And I mean, I don't think he's genocidal, Jeff Sessions, but I think he believes that, African Americans have their place. Donald Trump, as I've emphasized many times, is incredibly, the opposite of capable. He is incompetent. He is not good at things. But one of the things that the Trump administration has been able to accomplish is a serious crushing of all immigration to this country. And I'm not talking about the stuff at the border. I'm not talking about the kids in cages, which the Trump people are right to point out has roots in the Obama administration, though they absolutely did make it worse. I'm not talking about the asylum changes, which honestly, I think might not have been a terrible idea. I'm talking about the crushing of legal immigration to this country. I'm talking about the fact that foreign university students, the folks who have built great companies in this country, are no longer coming. Universities are going to be going bankrupt very shortly. High skilled immigration has been crushed. That has something that the Trump administration has accomplished, and the reason they've accomplished that is because of Jeff Sessions and Stephen Miller and the people that came in and were able to make this happen. So that's why I believe Jeff Sessions is worse than William Barr. William Barr is a piece of shit and has managed to make a dumb presidency marginally more damaging. The Jeff Sessions, Stephen Miller, his legacy is at the heart of the destruction of one of the most important things about America, which is its openness to immigration. So yeah, that's why I dislike Jeff Sessions. I am completely open to other interpretations. You can totally, hate William Barr more. I think that's definitely the consensus in the U.S. that William Barr is worse than the principal Jeff Sessions. But yeah, I don't like the idea of a white ethno state. Mostly because, yeah, I think most white people in this country are newcomers, as far as I'm concerned. And if they don't want to get on board with the way this country is organized, they can fuck off back to Europe. Anyway, sorry. Okay. Black Metal Silly says, as an engineer, will U.S. ever ditch inches, etc., and finally accept the metric system? Probably not. Yeah. I don't have a firm opinion on that. I don't care. Well, I guess Local Cool Sam says Black Metal Silly, it is doing it slowly without people realizing it. I'm going to be one of the last people standing against it. I'm going to talk about feet and yards and ridiculous, unscientific stuff like miles, like forever, long as possible. Anyway, yes, I'm sure that I know all the reasons. Fadel says the metric system is better than the imperial system. Even the British, who had it for a while, are abandoning it. Yada yada. Don't care. My miles, right or wrong. It's not something I take particularly seriously. Black Metal Silly says, indeed, but hopefully it would have happened not completely already in the past. Zemo5 says, Logo is cool extreme. Do you consider yourself qualified enough to answer questions? Oh, I don't. I don't really understand why we have contention on the patrons thing. Loga is a tremendously valued contributor to this channel who volunteers his time to moderate the massive public streams. And Loga has his own opinions, some of which I disagree with, and occasionally maybe moderates in ways that I don't appreciate. But he is volunteering his time and shouldn't have to be doing moderation here as well. So yeah, anyway, I'm just going to skip that. Biden did well in the debate. I feel a lot of people say Biden. I don't know, man. Like it's funny. Yeah, like I mean, maybe I'm just constitutionally Republican. Yeah, Fadel says Biden did well in the debate or something like. But man, I thought that Biden looked frail, and I thought that Pence, despite the fact that he's just an insane liar and a disgusting person who was making disgusting arguments, I think he came off as just smoother and more presidential and calmer. And how dare you impugn the American people by suggesting that our coronavirus response was anything other than flawless. He's a slimy fuck, but I think he did better than Harris. I don't know if that's like me being old, middle-aged and white, or misogynist, or what, or surrounded by Republicans in my family. I don't know what it is, but I think depending on a lot of the polls that we've seen, and I haven't seen enough polling on the vice presidential debate, mostly because who fucking cares? It's the vice presidential debate, though obviously more important this year with a bunch of, with a couple of geriatric candidates. Biden did well in the debate. Yeah, and wow, man, these comments are from a while ago. So yeah, that's how Mahathir Mohamad, the leader of Malaysia, is still kicking, going strong. Are you going to talk about Libya? Yes, I intend to talk about Libya. I'll talk about Libya right now. What the heck? So I'm falling behind. I do not have a ton to say about Libya other than the fact that Libya has opened the pumps. It's this weird situation where Tripoli controls the oil company. Sorry, Libya. There is the UN supported, internationally recognized government of Libya that controls what looks like smaller territory in the west of Libya, but actually is vastly larger population because of where people actually live, as in a vast country that's mostly desert. In the east, there is Haftar and the House of Representatives government, and those affiliated types. The weird thing is that Haftar controls much of the desert. The West, the Turkey, UN, U.S. Internationally recognized government controls, I think, the national bank or at least the national oil company, or maybe both. So it's this weird thing where Haftar can shut down the oil production physically or turn it on or what have you, but he doesn't get the money if anything is sold. So I believe since January of this year, or January or March, he, in an effort to shore up his flagging offensive against the more populous, internationally approved part, he shut off the oil. And it was actually kind of hilarious, his oil shut off, because he chose to try to create a mini oil crisis. I mean, 1 million barrels of oil, which is, I believe, what Libya was producing at the beginning of this year, is significant, or it used to be significant in the oil world, and that could have really shot prices up. However, he chose to do this in, I think, February or March of this year, just as the coronavirus drop in demand was hitting, and Saudi Arabia and Russia decided to do a price war. So he cut off all of Libya's oil industry to damage Tripoli, which I'm sure it did, and get the world to pay attention to what he wanted to happen in Libya and hold the world hostage. And the oil prices plummeted like to nothing. Actually to negative at one point. Didn't work out for him so well. In the middle of this year, as I've documented on this channel and more produced videos, Haftar finally lost, largely, I believe, largely due to Turkey's intervention on the side of the internationally approved government. This is the one thing where I'm unreservedly pro Turkey's foreign intervention. Haftar lost. He's a terrible person. That's great. There was an open question of like, okay, so is there going to be are they going to have a big brawl for Sirte and Jufra? The Egyptian government said, oh, if you try to go for Sirte and Jufra, this is the Turkish-backed official government, then we're going to invade, which I found quite laughable, because what really was going on was negotiations between Turkey's Erdogan and Putin's Russia. Sorry, Russia's Putin. Wait, anyway, who is one of the main supporters of Haftar. Egypt basically just sort of like, oh, me too, I count too. When it was really Putin who said to Turkey, okay, you've ended this offensive and now you go no further. And I think I've been saying for a couple months now, I think it's pretty likely that things are going to solidify here and we're going to get a frozen conflict. And the way that things are going to move forward from here is the differing sides of Libya being able to demonstrate value. Like if the government of national accord, this is the internationally approved Turkey-supported government, if they can finally get their shit together and start doing some positive things for their people, maybe do another election, I don't know. If they can do that, then they will strengthen their position and Haftar's position will get weaker. Haftar's not going to do any of that sort of stuff. But I think the fact that Haftar has allowed oil production to come back is an indication that, okay, we've got the frozen conflict. Turkey, the GNA are not going to try to take Sirte and Al Jufra in the middle of the country. Things are sort of settling down. Oil's going to get sold again. And I assume there's some kind of, some money gets shot to Haftar, the Tobruk government. This is a good sign because I think it means that, well, I think I would be very happy if Haftar had fallen completely, the GNA united the country and things moved forward. I think the best thing we could have reasonably expected was this sort of frozen conflict developing, and then hopefully the GNA not being as embattled is able to build on the higher legitimacy that it already has. So yeah, that's what I have to say about Libya. Got that one out of the way. Okay. Why can't Trump just not? Why can't Trump not just hire Alan Dershowitz? I mean, I don't know that Alan Dershowitz necessarily has the relevant expertise for government stuff. I mean, he's a defense attorney, right? Traditionally, and he's certainly become a talking head. But and I think he's a very good defense attorney, a famously good defense attorney. But that's in criminal matters. The kind of attorney who's going to cover your ass when you are attempting to do attempting to govern a country. That's a very different skill set from being a very competent criminal defense attorney. Just as with Rudy Giuliani, who was apparently a very successful prosecutor in New York City before he was a debatably successful, capitalizing on the successes of David Dinkins, mayor after that of New York City. That too isn't necessarily the right skill set to help a person govern a country. So yeah, they're different legal skill sets. So I don't know that, and I'm not even 100% sure that Alan Dershowitz. I think he's a very old man who has enjoyed a level of notoriety for supposedly being the liberal who defends Trump, and also like a super famous like Epstein guy, which is super gross. But he sort of enjoyed being notorious. I don't really know that Dershowitz would be eager to go in his late 70s or early 80s go figure out a whole new area of law. So yeah, I don't see that as particularly. Fadel points out that Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. That is absolutely true. Stephen Miller has done more to Local Cool Extreme says Stephen Miller has done more to single-handedly destroy American soft power, and mark my words, the Republic will suffer for having him anywhere near power for decades to come. Booyah, I agree completely. Have I converted you, Loga? Are you now on team Jeff Sessions is worse than William Barr? Because Jeff Sessions is the guy who gave us Stephen Miller. He's the guy who allowed Stephen Miller to cut his teeth in the senatorial office of Jeff Sessions. Okay. Oh, man. There are 11 people here. I'm psyched, but I feel like folks haven't been commenting for a while. But any questions, anything to say about the Libya thing? Anything I should talk about? Scott Locke said, Bolivia, October 13th. I think isn't it the 18th elections? Bolivia is on my list. I will get there. Okay. And I will do the Michigan militia scenarios as well. So let me try and go through the list a little. Because we've got an hour and a half and I haven't done many of these. Okay, Greece, Turkey, a kerfluffle ends exactly as I expected. I had a video that did very well talking about the clown show in Greece and Turkey. Even though I was quite negative about Turkey, it's fascinating. Like I've been quite negative about Turkey or Erdogan's actions in a couple of videos that have been seen by a lot of people. I admitted that the Armenian genocide happened, right? Like I think that's a big thing. I might have mentioned the Armenian genocide a couple times, but I ran a video on Tuesday where like I was like, yeah, the Armenian genocide totally happened. And like there were a whole bunch of Turkish nationalists who were like, thank you for this video. And I was just like, Like, I don't know. It's like kind of like, does Turkey have, I've always kind of suspected that like Erdogan had this incredible trump card, incredible like ploy that he always had in his back pocket, where if he just acknowledged the Armenian genocide, it's just like, and actually as he gets more and more desperate, like, it's possible, but he can't now, of course, because unlike before 2015, he really is reliant on hardcore Turkish nationalists, so he can't. But it's interesting that I ran that video that was like the Armenian genocide happened, and it's awful, and like a lot of Turkish nationalists were like, I don't think that happened, but but thanks for the video. And it was just like weird. What was I talking about? Yes, so the Greece-Turkey thing was loathed by Greek nationalists who drove that video to be one of the most successful I've had in months. Most successful this year, actually, because I didn't on some of the videos that have been seen more times this year, I've paid for advertising. And I didn't really have to do that on the Greece Turkey video. I think maybe I put like $5 on it on Facebook or something. But that did really, really well, mostly because a lot of Greek nationalists really hated it. And my central point, while I did like lay out like, hey, Turkey's got a position here, but I also said like Turkey shouldn't be pursuing this position by opting communist China's tactics. Like it was not a like unreservedly positive video for the Turks. But my main point was that the reason I called it a clown show, the reason that I was super pissed off by both of the folks who were pushing this, the reason I was so pissed off was because it was a clown show that made it more likely that the United States would be drawn in. And it was providing the United States, which has had just such a horrific impact on the whole region over the past 20 years, it was providing a free opportunity to the United States to look like the big guys, to look like the adults, to look sane and helpful and show how it's really, really important that the United States has big navies that police everything, which is obviously a concept that I'm pretty opposed to. That was the main point that I was trying to get across in the sort of East Mediterranean clown show video that Greek nationalists did not approve of. And on Tuesday, September 29th, exactly what I predicted was revealed to be the case. The U.S. Navy is now stationing another big ship on the Greek island of Crete, which is where Erdogan was pulling his South China Sea horse shit. So yeah, it's exactly as I predicted. Greece and Turkey and Egypt and Israel and Cyprus and Libya to a degree had given the United States exactly the opportunity that I would like there to be less of, an opportunity to look like the adults, to look like the people who know what's going on. You know, Big Daddy came in to fix things. And it's that attitude that has led to 1 million dead people in the Middle East. So not a fan of that. Greece and Turkey did that together, and it was dumb. And I said it was dumb, and I said it was going to have a dumb result, and it had a dumb result. So that's what I have to say about Greece and Turkey. Libya, I have covered. Let's see where we are with comments. Bolivia, I will get to Bolivia. Is that next? I'll do Bolivia now. Okay, so the Bolivia elections look like they are finally happening. Scott says October 13th. I thought October 18th. Did I write that? Anyway, regardless, over the next week, Bolivia is finally having elections. I feel like I've run through this almost every time, so folks here know this, but briefly, Bolivia had a socialist government from like 2003 until last fall. Unlike the socialist government in Venezuela, they were rampagingly successful, really amazing. Like, I think they pretty much just nationalized some foreign gas companies, which really pissed off a lot of people that are powerful and will fuck with countries if they do that. And then mostly had like kind of like a, somewhat planned but somewhat hands-off, use the energy resources to fund a lot of education and social programs, and like let the smaller economy like do its own thing. Wealth was, I think GDP tripled. Bolivia is traditionally one of the poorest countries in Latin America, also one of the most indigenous in a continent where, unfortunately, I mean, as with the United States, but much more openly, yet much less talked about, is run according to racist hierarchies. It's a very indigenous, very poor country. And Evo Morales, socialist, I'm a conservative guy, I don't necessarily generally like socialists, but Evo Morales, an indigenous, popularly elected president, took this country, tripled the GDP. It was amazing. And yeah, he probably should have given up power to a successor for sure. But in the fall of last year, there was a coup carried out against Evo Morales. It's become clear at the point where even the New York Times and the Washington, D.C. have run Washington Post have run stories saying, oh yeah, that was totally a coup. Basically what happened was the Organization of American States, which is a U.S. subsidiary, supposedly a multilateral organization, but is now sadly been revealed to still be something that just does what, the U.S. government says, claimed that there was a fraudulent election. Again, Evo Morales fucked up by staying in power too long. There were term limits. He should have honored them. He should have left. There was an election in the fall of last year. The Organization of American States said it was fraudulent, has recently been demonstrated, not just by like Democracy Now!, but by the New York Times and the Washington Post, that actually the OAS was lying. The election was not fraudulent, but Evo Morales was cooed out anyway. What's happening now is after the right-wing racist dictatorship that was installed, that a really disturbing number of people in the United States initially said was a good thing. Oh, look, we've defeated another strongman. Basically saying, because we're all stupid and we all apply things, and I think it would be legitimate actually to celebrate Maduro leaving. He's been a disaster, and like his fall would be something worth celebrating if we could, obviously have a sensible way of doing it. So a lot of people in the United States were like, "Oh, it's a Latin American socialist. He must be like Maduro, who destroyed his country." A lot of people celebrated this, which was horrifying, and it became a lot less possible because the racist, openly racist, right-wing dictatorship that replaced him, was delaying elections, did a massacre. I think did the massacres early on, but was absolutely doing repression, trying to ban political parties. Was just so clearly some horrific throwback to the 20th century. And Janine Áñez, this was the leader of that dictatorship, kept pushing off the elections, and now they are finally happening. I believe on October 13th or 18th, and yeah, we're gonna see what happens. I think it's Luis Arce, who is, I believe, credited with being Evo Morales' economy guy, has led almost every poll that has been taken. So it seems like the sort of socialist government that was cooed out may be replaced, and I think that would be a very happy result. Maybe put back in power. I think that'd be a very happy result. However, I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen. I attached links. There's a link here with polling, and I'm a little confused. I don't know how creditable that is. It's just what came up when I Googled polling. If that's creditable, then I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore. Luis Arce has, in every poll, been in first place, but he's been in first place with like 40% of the vote. This was when Janine Áñez, after promising that she would not, decided she was going to run. And then there's something Camacho, who's I think a less right-wing, horrifying figure than Janine Áñez, but also, and then there's Carlos Mesa, which is a even more palatable right-wing figure, who's probably wouldn't, put together death camps or, for indigenous people or, ban political parties, but absolutely would dismantle the nationalization of the petroleum industry that had done so well for the country. So yeah, not great. The thing is, Janine Áñez, recognizing she wasn't going to win, she was polling at like 10%, dropped out. That stuff was divided between Camacho and Mesa. Now it looks like still Luis Arce, the socialist guy, the successor to Morales, the economic architect of tripling GDP, is still far ahead. However, the way that it works is there's two elections. He has to, I think, be over 40% and win by 10% for there to not be a runoff. At the polling I saw there, it looks like there's going to be a runoff, and if there is a runoff, that means that all of those right-wing votes get consolidated behind Carlos Mesa. And I don't know. I mean, it's not like the Camacho and the Áñez supporters are going to be like, oh, well, I'm going to go support the socialists. No, I think what would happen in the runoff is they'd all get consolidated behind Mesa and he might win. So it's, I think a lot of people were thinking about this for a while, like, oh, Luis Arce, the successor, again, it's MAS. I don't know what the acronym stands for. The Socialist Party is automatically going to win. I'm not sure that's going to happen anymore. However, I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing for the socialists, because the next year or so are going to be kind of a shitty time to be in power, honestly. Like anywhere, frankly. It's not so great. Going to be so great for the Democrats, especially for Bolivia, which is a petroleum and tourism dependent place. When there's not going to be any tourism, and petroleum products are a lot cheaper than they have been. I think they're a little more gas oriented, which isn't as destroyed as oil has been. But yeah, it's not going to be great. I don't know. Maybe the MAS is kind of dodging a bullet by letting the neoliberals control the country for a couple of years in a sort of really shitty economic environment. Mm. Anyway, that's what I have to say about the Bolivian election. Let's see what Scott Locks has to say about the Bolivian election. First, let's go to the question. Scott Locke says, Bolivia, October 13th elections, a victory for grassroots democracy, forcing the coup government to have elections. Yeah, it's exciting. I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be a victory for the Socialist Party that I think by rights should win. What did Scott Locke say? Yeah, super chat stickers don't work. That makes me sad. But, it's patrons. You guys are already contributors. I don't, need super chats from you guys. I'm grateful to all of you who are here. Okay, Haftar is, I'm going to go through Scott Lux's Bolivia comments. October 18th. Okay, the election is on October 18th. It's a victory for democracy over the U.S. OAS coup. That is a huge victory. That's true. Even if the Socialist Party does not win, it is nice that there are public elections again. And I don't think Carlos Mesa is as fully tarnished by the fucked up coup that Áñez and I think Camacho did. I don't know. I'm going way off the reservation. That's probably a problematic term now, isn't it? I'm going way off the beaten path here. I talk about Bolivia because I believe it is important. I am not someone who has read in depth about the situation in Bolivia. I just read news articles, once a month when Scott reminds me I should be talking about Bolivia. Yeah, so but yeah, I mean, who knows? Okay. Super says socialist capitalist, I would say. Presumably that's how he's describing Evo Morales, Scott. A lithium contract with a German company was canceled, provoking Elon Musk's ire. That's possible. I generally tend to be little suspicious of a lot of the sort of one explanation reasons for any kind of conflict. Like the amount of comments I get on a Syria video that's like, don't you understand the whole war in Syria is about Jenny Capital and the Rothschilds and this one pipeline that did or did not happen. And it's just like, look, you don't have single solutions. Like Evo Morales didn't fall exclusively because Elon Musk got pissed off. Disgustingly, I think Elon Musk said this as much on his Twitter, but I see that as a joke. He said something like, someone took him to task for the fact that the Bolivia coup had happened. And he says, we coup who we want. I've got a lot of indulgence for Elon Musk's disgusting Twitter presence. I've made a video talking about it's in the past couple months. I talk about how actually his Twitter presence serves a purpose by ingratiating himself with Trump. But yeah, that was just really incredibly fucked up that he would go in and celebrate the coup, a coup in one of the most successful Latin American countries over the past 20 years that killed people. He was just laughing about it. I think that's pretty disgusting. I don't think it was intentional, malicious, but yeah, not cool. But I don't think the single cause for any given, like in Syria, it wasn't like a pipeline. It was a pipeline, and it was Assad's opposition to Israel, and it was Russia's need to hold on. It was the fact that he had a Russian naval base and has since the Cold War era. It was Erdogan's need to shore up his political base by standing up for Sunnis. It was a million things. So yeah, it's not just obviously it's not just Elon Musk was pissed off about a lithium contract. It was a galaxy of oil companies that were pissed off about not having access to stuff. There's a whole political industry in the United States that hates any kind of socialism, even if it's successful. There is deep racist roots throughout Latin America that were really bothered, scandalized, and horrified by a very successful indigenous leader. I mean, there's never just one solution, one reason why these horrible things happen. There are lots and lots of reasons. And yeah, and also, I mean, it is worth pointing out, Evo Morales was a dumbass. Like the Constitution said he'd had his terms. He could have retired as like the most, really one of the most successful leaders of Bolivia ever. But he wanted to keep the party going. He gave the opening to all of these enemies of himself, his party, his country, by completely unnecessarily. So yeah, there's lots and lots of reasons. Okay, long-term lithium is important. Tesla's plan, 500,000 cars, would consume all world's production. I think Tesla's already producing 500,000 cars a year, actually. Isn't it? Yeah, I think so. Long-term important as a giant salt plant has perhaps 50% of world's lithium. Actually, absolutely, and actually that actually makes me happy. That it would be fantastic if Bolivia could sort of keep going and with lithium sort of replacing the petroleum revenues. That'd be great. Archie Scott says, yeah, Arce might not win in the first round. That's the socialist, so Mesa could win in second round. But as long as Áñez is out and coup is stopped, it's all good. Scott says, Carlos Mesa is standard neoliberal. Áñez was a Christian fascist. Okay, so yeah, so like it seems like Carlos Mesa is not a fascist, according to Scott, who follows us much more closely than I do. Yeah, lithium is important long term. When all autos switch to lithium, the world will need 20 times current production. Short-term lithium prices have dropped from 10,000 a ton. I dropped to 10,000 a ton from $35,000 a ton. Yeah, my understanding with lithium is that it is not the fact that there's not enough lithium all over the world. This is also the case with rare earths, which is another classic single stream resource explanation for everything, is that China controls the rare earths, so they will control the world. And actually with petroleum as well, like what initially clued me in to the fact that the world oil industry was in terrible trouble and was not going to come back. The reason I've been talking about this since 2016 and 4 years before everybody sort of started conceding it this year. The reason wasn't because I was big in electric cars. That has come afterwards. It's not because I was big on shale. Never really been big on shale, but became aware of that later. The reason that I was so convinced that the oil industry was absolutely fucked was because I did some work doing some oil industry analysis for like a trade publication when I was starting the channel. And I was like, oh my God, there's oil and gas everywhere. Oil and gas is more accessible in certain places, but because of the incredible run-up in prices that had happened because of China's growing consumption over the first decade of this century, resources had been developed everywhere. So it was so clear that there was just this incredible wall of supply that was about to crush onto the market. And honestly, that wall of supply is still hanging there waiting to collapse on the market. And that's the same thing with lithium. That's the same thing with rare earths. It's not that there's a shortage of these materials throughout the world. There's a shortage of these materials throughout the world at a given price. And that's why Venezuela has collapsed. Yes, the United States has done nasty things to make it more likely. Yes, the Chavez Maduro regime were just insane fucking idiots who thought the party would never stop. However, the main reason Venezuela has collapsed is because their oil is no longer viable at sort of $40 a barrel. It's not that kind of thing. But if the lithium price goes up, as it probably should, it's fluctuating massively. If the lithium price gets driven up again, then more and more places become viable. And what's interesting is once a place becomes viable, it doesn't stop producing necessarily because it's expensive to stop producing when the price falls down again. So like the broader thing, the access to things just increases. And I think that's going to be the case with lithium and rare earth. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I think Scott Locks is exactly right to point out that lithium is a good thing for Bolivia going forward. Okay, there was some other comments above that I had missed. Okay, that's Libya. That's Bolivia. Let me finish up the comments. Okay, why can't Trump just hire Alan Dershowitz? Stephen Miller's done more sending the logos for decades to come. Scott Locks, Bolivia, October 13 elections. Cover that. Todd says, I can't send super chats. Well, that fucking sucks. I'm sorry, guys. I would love to give you the opportunity to send me money. But I'll be doing another live chat at some point next week. And yeah, you guys are all supporters on Patreon. Well, most of you are. I hope you all are. So I can't. You guys are generous enough, and I'm very grateful. Okay, Stephen knows what nationalist. Stephen knows the more decades to come. Bolivia. I can't send super chats. Time to go to sauna. Thank you for the newscast. Goodbye, Black Metal Silly. Haftar is old and can presumably die soon. Could there be a successor? I'm pretty sure that Haftar's got some shitty sons to want to follow their shitty father. And I'm sure they're going to try and do that. I think it's going to be difficult. Haftar bills Libyan National Army and like what's going on in the East is somehow more official and established. That's his whole pitch. Was like, oh no, I'm a real military, unlike this nasty collection of militias over in Tripoli with the government of national accord, and that's kind of bullshit. The Libyan National Army is absolutely, I think it's probably fair to say, just as much because it's a smaller group, but you know, similarly made up of tribal affiliations and militias and the same sorts of horseshit. You know, maybe a little more effectively centralized. And I think that when the actual man in charge, Haftar, passes on, then I think that it's going to be very hard. It's hard in any. It is difficult in any system for the son to succeed the father. And places where it works, like Syria and Azerbaijan, where Hafiz Assad was followed by Bashar Assad, and Azerbaijan, where Haidar Aliyev was followed by Ilham Aliyev. It's because there's like a very centralized, very authoritarian state with a party that, you know, can be forced to go on board. That's not what's going on in eastern Libya. I think there's actually, I think it is a collection of militias. It is the Tobruk government that is, I think, very likely getting a little sick of Haftar. I think Haftar's been arresting, you know, supposed parliamentarians. So yeah, I don't know if there's a. I know that I think the other big politician that gets mentioned a lot is somebody I don't know, like the Speaker of the House of Representatives or something like that. But my understanding is, you know, he conflicts with Haftar sometimes. And I think if Haftar died, he'd want to be the big man in charge, and Haftar's kids, with, you know, presumably some of the militia and tribal loyalty, would So I don't know. I think Haftar's death. Again, he's in his mid to late 70s, but he's also a guy. He's an old man with purpose, and an old man with purpose, as the I think still leader of Malaysia, as Loga can attest, is a dude in his 90s who was supposed to retire, you know, a year or two back. So yeah, Haftar, who knows, man? He could keep on rocketing around, strongmanning it up for 5, 10, hopefully not 15 years to come. So I think what's most important in Libya is that the GNA demonstrates that it actually is a government of national accord that is worthy of the support and legitimacy that it does have. So anyway, okay. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I guess you can't super chat on private streams. So super chat next time on the public one. Okay. Black Metal Silly. Okay. Asks, will these Michigan militia scenarios lead U.S. to some kind of Handmaid's Tale reality? No, I do not think they will. I think that the militia people are powerful, more powerful than is good, are disturbing. I think what will happen. I'm actually getting sort of a hopeful, but I think delusional sense over the past couple of days that, like, who knows? Maybe this plot to kidnap the Michigan governor. Maybe that's the Oklahoma City bombing this decade. Maybe nobody has to die this time. There was a huge militia movement in the 1990s that ended when someone who was affiliated with that movement blew up a federal building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, state in the United States, killing 150 people. And that basically ended the militia movement of the 1990s. Because people were like, whoa, I want to like put on fatigues and go run around with machine guns in the woods. I don't want to kill like 150 million people and a bunch of babies. So like, like that sort of ended that. And what I expect, and I think I've talked about before, I expect some kind of Oklahoma City. So I think this militia movement thing is powerful. It could potentially get more powerful under a Biden or Harris administration. And then we'll get something awful. I think probably another bombing is unlikely. I think what's you see the oh, what's his fucking name? I don't give names. There's the teenager who killed some folks. May or may not have actually been attacked. I don't know. Who cares? Little dipshit showed up at a protest, killed some folks. Week or so back, we're already seeing people die at these protests when you've got an insane president yelling at people to crush people, and a lot of heavily armed people going to protest. People are going to die. What I think is likely is that we're going to have something really fucked up. Who knows? Maybe it'll be at the Michigan State House. It seems to be a flashpoint where, like, like a couple dozen people are going to die in a gun battle. And then I think that's likely to be our Oklahoma City. And I think that's sort of how this militia thing will end. No, I don't think there's a snowball's chance in hell of a bunch of dipshits in tactical gear. I think there's a chance of assassinations for sure. I think there's a chance of real awful stuff in New Oklahoma City of some sort. But the chances of like a real like change to the U.S. government forced by some weekend warriors with AK-47 or not, I guess AR-15s. Yeah, no, I don't see any real chance of that. Okay, Black Metal Silly. Okay, Federal Public Lives Haftar is old and Cloud Redemption. Super chat stickers don't work. Yeah. Lithium Contra. Okay, we have done the Bolivia questions. All right. Okay, so we got Libya done. Okay, back to the Michigan militia question. What's scarier? Is my question right now. The Gretchen Whitmer kidnap scenario or the FBI? So it's been a big thing. It's like coming up on my WhatsApps with my college buddies. Well, we all went to the University of Michigan, so I'm actually in Michigan right now. There could be a Michigan militia outside my door, trying to turn me into the Handmaid's Tale or something. Actually, I don't think I'd make a very good handmaid. But yeah, I'm in gorgeous northern Michigan right now. It's interesting. So I'm in a lake house, and it is a very interesting. The inequality up here is pretty stark. Later today, I'm probably going to go drive into Traverse City to see a movie, and we can do that up here. There's not a lot of COVID up here in the north, and I'm going to drive through a number of towns, and if they're on a lake like this is. They're quite nice, and they're filled with, retired professionals or there's a lot of school teachers around here. A lot of retired school teachers with nice pensions around here in my neighborhood. But basically, there are other lakes with mansions and sort of richer people. But on my hour-long drive to Traverse City, I'm gonna drive through a lot of places with like Dollar Generals, which is it's a place where you can buy things cheaply, and trailer parks, and it can be pretty grim. You can sort of see some of the roots of the current American problems. However, as has become incredibly contentious on the internet today, the dipshits who got arrested by the FBI over the past couple of days for a supposed plot to kidnap the Democratic governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, are actually not poor people. These are sort of folks who can afford $50,000 trucks and big collections of guns and have the leisure time to get entrapped in plots by FBI informants, paid informants, and actual FBI undercover officers. So it's interesting. My first instinct when I see something from the FBI is to go like, oh, the FBI came up with another terror plot. And because that's what the FBI does. If you ask the FBI, if you collect stats, I think they're probably a little quieter about this now because the reporting on it has been so bad. There have been hundreds of terror plots in the United States since 9/11. If you actually do the math, and I think The Nation did the math on this 5-10 years ago. If you actually look at the hundreds of terror plots, all but 3 or 4 of them, and those are including, the big lone wolf crazy person, shootings like at the Pulse nightclub, San Bernardino. Um, I'm sure there was other ones that they call terror plots, but are really just school shootings, which are American as apple pie. They're just mass shootings. Like there's really been, I think, one. There was some of the Times Square. The guy who attempted to bomb Times Square was like, oh, like that was actually a guy who came up with a plot himself. All the other ones, the hundreds of plots, are basically some variation of a mentally handicapped Somali immigrant being identified by the FBI, somebody marginal, doesn't have a lot of friends, being identified at the mosque, and then somebody paid by the FBI concocts a plot for this guy to lead, and then gets him to lead it. They actually made a really horrifying and sadly funny movie called The Day Shall Come. I think that's what it's called. Is Google Chris Morris and Anna Kendrick about this, because it's very, very common. The FBI basically invents terror plots. And my first instinct when I saw this was like, oh, the FBI totally, they're going after white supremacists now, which is great. But like the question, of course, with the radicalization of anybody is, at what point did this go from a bunch of dipshits talking shit on a message board into a real plot that was going to do real things? And did the FBI turn it into a real plot that's going to do real things? And if that happened, is that entrapment? I think I was talking at the top of this show about how the FBI and the national security state is completely free of any kind of repercussions, can do whatever the fuck it wants, and media generally participates in that. And it's something we should be very, very suspicious of. So if it's entrapment, like if you're like a regular police person and you invent a crime, and force somebody to commit it, or pay somebody to commit it, or convince somebody to commit it, that's called entrapment, and that's usually a defense. I mean, well, if you're rich and white enough to afford a lawyer, that's usually a defense that will get you freed from that crime. The cops can't do that. The FBI can and does do it all the fucking time. So whenever you see something like from the FBI that says that we've stopped a terror plot, you should absolutely be suspicious and be like, yeah. Someone put this way in a tweet that I retweeted. I don't recall who it was, who said, if you see an FBI terror plot being revealed, always read the article and ask yourself, did the FBI invent this terror plot? Now, and as I said, when this first came up and people were talking about this, like it actually, showed up in my college buddies' WhatsApp group. I was like, this is how you know whether it's real or not. If this is the only news cycle they ever get, if you hear this, everybody gets scared about it, everybody gets outraged about it, and then you never hear about it ever again, these people will be convicted. They will go to jail, for the rest of their lives, but it's probably bullshit. It's probably nothing to it. If we hear stories about it for days to come and we learn more about these people and they actually do look bad, then it's real. And it's too early to say, but like, I think we are getting to the point where it's like, oh no, yeah, these people, legitimate fuckwads. Like they legitimately suck and they legitimately like should have been gotten for something. However, I'm not sure they should legally. The reason I am like, fuck it, I'm not sympathetic to these people again anymore, is apparently some of these guys were the guys who went to the Michigan. This was a famous thing about, I don't know, 3 to 6 months ago. Some of these guys were the guys who stormed the Michigan state capitol. And not stormed, like you're allowed to bring guns onto the Michigan state capitol, which is fucking insane to me. So they came in with assault rifles and were basically watching, like from the public viewing galleries, which most of our state houses do. Like all 50 states in the United States have their own parliaments, have their own state houses where people make laws for the states. And yeah, they stood there with their assault rifles and just sort of looked down at the legislators menacingly. It's really fucked up shit, made me deeply angry. Unfortunately, completely legal under the laws of the state of Michigan, which is fucking insane. Um, so the reason these folks were identified, the reason they are now being arrested is because they were at this. Man, now I'm convincing myself to be more on their side again. Is because they undertook this disgusting, you know, decay of the empire, decay of the republic type protest movement that is legal within their legal rights to do, is the reason that they were targeted and became a part of this plot. I read the complaint briefly. I don't care enough, especially now. I don't care enough about these assholes to really do a detailed read. But reading the complaint, it was clear that at all of their planning meetings, like half the people at the planning meeting were either paid FBI informants or undercover FBI, like actual sworn officers or whatever. So it's like, yeah, it's going to be real fucking hard. I think if these folks have anything like competent legal representation, it's going to be real hard for, I think, the government to conclusively argue that these folks did these things because they came up with it themselves, and because again, these aren't actually the poor folks in trailer parks who shop at Dollar General. That there are many poor white folks who shop at Dollar General and live in trailer parks up around here. I mean, within 10 miles of me, you can find a few thousand, I'm sure. These are not those guys. They probably will have decent legal representation. So actually, we may never hear about this again, and they may actually get off, which is frankly an improvement from the impoverished, Somali and Pakistani immigrants who are usually targeted by the FBI because they can't afford legal representation, and there are hundreds of those guys. I mean, maybe that's unfair. Maybe some of them get out, but there are easily dozens of those guys who participated in an FBI-created terror plot because they wanted a friend. And are in jail for the rest of their lives. That is also something that may happen with this case. So yeah, it's part of a kind of a fucked up transition where I don't like terrorists. I don't like people who kill people. But I've always been very against the FBI creating terrorists. And even though I like white supremacists and people who think it's okay to bring assault rifles to Congress, to parliaments. Weren't we talking earlier about Armenia, where some guy went and where a bunch of folks took their assault rifles to a parliament and shot down the prime minister and a bunch of other legislators? So yeah, I have no truck with people who fly Confederate flags and think it's okay to bring assault rifles to parliaments. However, that does not mean I think they should go to jail for the rest of their life for engaging in something that, even though it shouldn't be, was legal. So I don't know. It's a weird thing. And what I think I've done, so I'll stop talking about this, is when you see something that says the FBI has identified a terror plot, even if it's a bunch of white supremacist assholes, be suspicious. Because this is how the FBI, this is how the national security state gets powerful enough that they can determine the results of 2 U.S. presidential elections in a row. That's some deeply fucked up shit that I will definitely be doing a public video on within 2 or 3 days of Biden's victory. And if, Jesus, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do if Trump wins. Move back to Turkey? I don't know. Maybe really go into full-time lobbying for the Ak Party, because at that point, I don't believe anything anymore and I don't care. I don't know. We'll see. All right. That was a lot of talking. I apologize. So lithium played no role in the coup, but a long-term factor. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's right about Bolivia, and it might have played a role in the coup. I don't know, man. One never knows. Like maybe Elon Musk was in town to suck off Trump and went down to the Organization of American States fundraiser and was like, "Hey, man, I'll give you a Tesla if you bullshit up this." I mean, that could have been what happened exactly, but I find it unlikely. But yeah, so lithium is a role in the Bolivia issue. With Fadel says, with QAnon being adopted by Republican politicians in the House of Representatives, is it the future of the Republican platform? I don't think so. I think like, I don't know what the fucking future of the Republican platform is. Pretty sure it's not QAnon. Because at a certain point, like, there's the analogy for QAnon is what it is. It's a millenarian cult. This is something that comes up in Christianity over and over and over and over again. You've got a bunch of people who believe that the apocalypse is coming. With QAnon, it's not the apocalypse, the end of the world, but it is actually something very much like that. That Judgment Day is coming, and the Lord is going to come down and say who the good people are and send them to hell, and say who the good people are and bring them to heaven. That's explicitly what QAnon's ideology is about. Except it's, Trump is going to come down and he's going to send the bad people to jail, the Hollywood people you don't like, and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama, and the Bidens, they're going to jail. And then the country is going to have this great revival, a great awakening, and we're going to go back to the way things used to be that were awesome. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's what QAnon believes. So what happens with these millenarian cults is, what'll often happen, which is what QAnon has done multiple times, is somebody will say, well, on August 5th, 1876, that's the day of judgment. We're all ready for it. And that's in 2 years from now. So let's all move to the middle of Wyoming, and we're going to build a city, God's city on the hill, and sit and wait for this time 2 years hence when Judgment Day happens, and we're going to be ready for Jesus. And then that day in 1876 comes, and the charismatic leader goes, I've had a revelation. In fact, the real day of judgment is in 1879. And, half of the followers are like, fuck this shit. Or maybe even 10% of the followers are like, fuck this shit. And they take off. But still, 50 to 90% of his followers are still there. And they wait for that day in 1879. And the guy goes, I've had a revelation. It's not actually 1879. It's 1890. And maybe he gets killed. And some guy comes in and is like, oh, I'm the real leader who says, blah, blah, blah. But eventually this shit just peters out. And I think QAnon's already gone. It's the internet. Things happen faster. Like QAnon's already gone through a couple iterations of, their Judgment Day, their great happening, like not happening. That's happened a couple times already. So like, eventually, like a lot of the crazier things will filter out, and QAnon will be like the Tea Party, or it'll be like some other faction of the Republican Party that's like, well, really, but we're just serious about sex trafficking, and that's what really matters. And of course, that's just old crazy stuff. And then, of course, when they lose the old crazy stuff, they'll lose their electoral legitimacy. I don't see QAnon as becoming like the center of anything going forward. Do I see like weird conspiracy shit being the center of things going forward? For sure. Like the whole idea that hordes of Mexicans or Latin American people are coming, that's an insane conspiracy that has been widely disproven. We're now into the second decade of that being over. That shit ended in 2008. It was already ending before 2008 and is over. Like, people will believe crazy, crazy shit forever in politics. But no, I don't think the specific QAnon conspiracy is going to become the core of the Republican Party. That prompts the very interesting question, like, what the fuck is the core of the Republican Party going forward? Like, I don't know, man. Like, it's confusing stuff. Because I think you can make a pretty good case that the Republican Party is losing a shit ton of. Traditionally, the Republican Party like talks about abortion, talks about hating gay people, talks about throw some racism in there, but it's mostly just a bunch of like corporate guys who want to get tax cuts and make sure that there's not any environmental regulation for oil and gas companies. That's all the Republican Party's ever been, and it's been a very effective coalition. And that money is disappearing. So they've still got a lot of batshit crazy voters, about 35-40% of the country. But like, I don't think there's definitely still a lot of rich folks who like tax cuts, but it's become very clear now. And I think like the Democrat story, the reason that folks have so much more money in the Democratic Party right now, that's one of the crazy stories. Like billionaire Trump, doesn't have enough money. His campaign's going bankrupt. And Biden is really well sourced. And that is because of large individual donors, like large, high scale individual donors. It is for like Sanders style people giving $2 or $5 whenever they can. But it's that and all the corporate money. Not all the corporate money. There's some, old dumb billionaires who are sticking by Trumpism. But for like the top, not necessarily all of the top 1%, but for the top 20%, for like educated people who like thought maybe, oh, like, hey, this Trump thing could be kind of funny, and I really like tax cuts. Like those folks are like, oh no, this Trump shit isn't funny at all. Like this is horrifying, including seniors who have most of the wealth in this country. I've just been like, like, and I guess it's still an individual donor if you're giving up to $2,000 to any given candidate, but like people who can do that aren't really like grassroots Bernie Sanders style $2, $5 donors. Like so, it's both of those. So basically, the Democratic Party is becoming the party of the sensible rich, the suburbs and whatnot. So we're like, what the fuck is the Republican Party anymore? Like, do you need to have some kind of charismatic reality TV show asshole to get Republicans at all competitive in races going forward? I don't fucking know. Something that we're just beginning to see the fallout from is that oil and gas and coal folks are the beating heart of the Republican Party. Ben Shapiro, he's the guy who wins Facebook every day with his posts and his podcasts, sort of right wing, just respectable right wing stuff. He's like anti Trump. Trump is a terrible, terrible thing, but this is why we got Trump. This is why we got Trump. It's because of the leftists. I don't like Trump, but like that kind of horseshit. Like Daily Wire, that's 100% oil money. There's a ton of what has underpinned the Republican Party as a going concern for the past, since LBJ, actually, LBJ, the Democratic president, was a big time supported by Texas oil money. But really, certainly since Reagan, it's all been like Republican shit primarily. So yeah, like what happens when nobody's making that much oil in the US anymore? Or maybe they're making a lot, still making over, 7 or 8, 9, 10 million barrels of oil a day every year, but they don't have a lot of spare money to put into politics. The coal industry is gone. It's gone. It's crazy. And yeah, those were huge supporters of the Republican Party. I remember being a 20-something in DC. The death of the coal industry in the United States is a brand new thing, or rather over the past decade thing. Because coal actually reached its peak of usage in the United States, not in like, the 1890s, but in like the early 2000s. Huge business. One of the funniest things about living in Washington, D.C. is that lobbyists take out advertising in the Washington, D.C. metro. And there was this clean coal was everywhere, and so all that money that supports Republican causes and Republican horseshit everywhere is just it's disappearing, which is frankly great. But yeah, so I have no idea what the Republican Party is going to look like. But I'm pretty sure it's not going to be QAnon. Okay. Scott Luck says the storming of the Michigan Capitol was so egregious. Maybe it is good the FBI makes an example of them. Maybe. I don't know, man. Like, so that the classic example for that is like, well, Al Capone was a horrible, horrible gangster, and the federal government got him on tax fraud. So that's better. That's like and everybody kind of agrees with that. But it's kind of interesting that that's like, it's funny because that's kind of, I think, included in every story of Al Capone. What you wonder is like, is the reason we still hear about Al Capone? I don't know. Gosh, most of you guys are much younger than me. Al Capone was that's an interesting poll. The 9 people who was watching, who has heard of Al Capone? He's the fantastic Brian De Palma. Yeah, I think fantastic. Maybe not a great cinema, but the Untouchables. It was that 80s or 90s Brian De Palma film with Kevin Costner and Sean Connery taking on Robert De Niro, who plays Al Capone. So Al Capone's a famous Chicago mobster who killed a lot of people allegedly, and I think we go a little beyond allegedly. I think it's an accomplished historical fact that he killed a lot of people, and ran a significant part of the illegal alcohol business during Prohibition. Was famously arrested on tax fraud charges. and went to jail. I think died in jail under tax fraud charges. And yeah, it's weird how we always like get that like story like it's such a good thing, and it's like, is it such a good thing? I think about Joe Arpaio. Joe Arpaio is a murderous, nasty fuck. That I've run a video being very angry about the fact that he was pardoned by Trump, but he was arrested on a contempt of court. Well, actually, no, that is directly connected. It was contempt of court because he refused to acknowledge court orders to stop racial profiling. Actually, no, that's 100% legitimate. The stuff that I sympathize with is 100% legitimate. The stuff I don't sympathize with is wrong and unconstitutional. Hypocrisy. But yeah, so like, okay, so if it's legitimate to go after a gangster and a murderer for tax fraud, which is it's weird how on like that mental meme there is sort of interesting. How that works. Like, that is interesting because okay, if you've heard of Al Capone, tell me if you've heard of Al Capone, and have you heard of the fact that Al Capone was before I mentioned it, have you heard about the fact that Al Capone was arrested for tax fraud rather than murder, and that's a good thing? Because I think that's probably like the second thing you know about Al Capone, which is super interesting. But yeah, so like, is it like so? Yeah, for murder, I think I would even though I think it's dubious, I would be on board for using tax fraud charges to arrest murderers and bootleggers. Oh, I mean, bootleggers are just American heroes. But am I okay with arresting someone who's engaged in a legal form, a bad and stupid and dumbly legal, inappropriately legal action? Am I okay with him being persecuted or arrested for something else because he did a protest? No, I'm not. I think the appropriate response to the fact that it's legal to bring an assault weapon to the Michigan Congress or Michigan State House, the appropriate response to that is to fucking make it illegal to bring an assault rifle to the Michigan House of Delegates, not to find other reasons to arrest the folks who do those things. Yeah, I don't know. Fuck these guys. I don't know, man. Now that we talk about it more and more, maybe they will come up in a video after the election. We got to get Trump out, and then we can work on the FBI. But you're right, absolutely right, Scott Lux. The storming of the Michigan Capitol was insanely egregious. It just absolutely horrifying. I mean, can you imagine being an Armenian and seeing that and being like, "Fuck, man, yeah, I remember when that happened, and the prime minister got shot." Fadel says, "I've been sending your latest video to some prominent YouTubers, and one of them has seen it." Well, thanks, man. That's cool. I hope they've enjoyed it, and I hope I'm always looking to do collaborations. Let's see. Fadel says the Republican Party is made up of crazy conspiratorialism and fascism. Normally I'd say that's excessive, but over the past 4 years, I think it's fair, yeah, undeniable. But no, but don't sleep on the plutocrats being able to take over the plutocrats hijacking the administrative state for their personal benefit. That's the root of the institutional power of the Republicans. And it also, important to remember, it also feeds a lot of the insanity. So, like, I don't know. I mean, things could get a lot better with that. Trump destroyed the good of the Republican Party. Free trade makes the world richer and safer and pro-immigrants. Fortunately, he's fracked it up demographically. Fortunately, what? Yeah, I think that's true. I think, I mean, free trade is an incredibly massive concept, and there's a whole wide range of practices, tariffs, subsidies, and sort of attitudes towards an incredibly broad range of government practice that are included in that simple statement, free trade. Like, I took a class in law school on the World Trade Organization and barely scraped the surface of what goes on when we discuss free trade. Like, so saying that free trade is good is like sort of like saying like government is good or government is bad or Bible is good or Bible is bad. Like it is an incredibly complex, multifarious thing where power is wrapped up in it. Free trade has indisputably, I think, been great for the United States. I think it's been really great for a lot of people and but what are we talking about when we're talking about free trade? But yeah, I think that the Republican Party, absolutely, as I talked about, like I think Reagan's approach and the way that both the Republican and Democratic Party followed in his footsteps was fucking fantastic for like the 80s and 90s. And then it really came off the rails in the last decade. And as with the election of Donald Trump, it has clearly failed utterly. So yeah, the Republican Party is a wreck. It's a mess. So Fadal has heard of Al Pacino, has heard of Al Capone. He first read about Al Capone in a Tintin comic, which is fantastic. I love Tintin. Except, I mean, I love most Tintin. Anyway, okay, we've done the what? Okay, the Yemen war. We are at 2.5 hours, so I'm just going to briefly blow through the rest of this. So the Yemen war centers on Marib. Basically, I didn't want to let a monthly update go by without mentioning Marib. I don't think of Marib. Marib. I don't know how to pronounce it at all. Is a city in Yemen that is sort of the main area of contention between the Saudis and the Houthis at this moment. And it's very important for two reasons. Territorially speaking, again, as I harp on with Yemen all the time, it is a country where it looks like the Houthis don't control much, but they control most of the places where people actually live. So Marib is a country that sort of goes out into the middle of, not to the middle, you mean, you know, if you were just looking at it on the map, you'd say, "Oh, this is almost, you know, practically on the west coast of Yemen." But no, it's far enough into the desert where this is sort of like, if the Houthis managed to take Marib, then Marib. I should really, if I was going to talk about it, I should have figured out how to pronounce it. If the Houthis take that, then there's a lot of potential communication, transportation networks that simply no longer work. Like Marib is sort of like how you can get from Saudi Arabia down through Marib into parts of southern Yemen that are nominally affiliated with the Yemeni government. So if Marib gets taken territorially, that's a huge blow. And it's basically, I mean, it's essentially the war being over. Also, Marib appears to be the only place where the internationally recognized government, because the Saudis sponsor them, this is an internationally recognized government that has lived in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, for the past 6 years. This is not like Libya, where it's an internationally recognized government that only controls part of the country, and you know it's a little debatable. And blah, blah, blah. No, these guys control fucking nothing, except, of course, because they're internationally recognized, things like the central bank and the tiny oil industry that Yemen has. So they can keep going because the parts in the south, as I've emphasized many times, that are nominally affiliated, they're more affiliated with the United Arab Emirates than they are with Saudi Arabia, are now getting further and further down the line towards wanting full autonomy from Yemen, which leaves this sort of official Yemeni president who doesn't control the north, because where most people live, because the Houthis have controlled that for, I mean, more than 5 years at this point. And then the south, this much smaller, but still very significant, mostly Aden, which has been an extraordinarily significant city and is a very large city, and then sort of surrounding territories. The South doesn't want him either. So Marib, through a lot of Saudi money and funding, is this place that is like the only fucking place in Yemen where the nominally internationally recognized president has any power at all anymore. So if that disappears, but I think I did want to emphasize, like, I was looking for stories on Yemen, and Reuters was like, Marib is a big deal, and if this Houthi offensive succeeds, yada yada yada. I want to point out that this has been the story for the past 3 or 4 months. Actually, this was the story before COVID. But I don't think I'd ever really mentioned it before. Folks are, I mean, it's possible that there was enough movement to justify Reuters bringing out this new story, or it's quite possible they just wanted to say something about Yemen. But I think that's a really important dynamic to understand. And I think because COVID has probably, to some extent, frozen things a little bit in Yemen, and horrifically also cratered a lot of the humanitarian aid that Yemenis rely upon to survive, because nobody has spare money anymore. I think that Marib dynamic is something worth looking at on a map and being like, oh, that's Marib. And if the Houthis do take it, the Saudis are the Saudis have already lost the war. I've got a script I've been developing for way too long on that topic. But if Marib goes, then gonzo. All right. Wow, I've been doing this for 2.5 hours. Nobody seems to be commenting anymore. So that's Yemen. We did Bolivia. We did the Durham report. What's fascinating, this was from September, actually, and I did not mention it. And I felt that I should. Saudi Arabia is my thinking has been evolving a little bit on Saudi Arabia, not fundamentally. I've said that Saudi Arabia will no longer be Saudi Arabia by 2030, and I firmly stand by that. But as time has gone on, I've gotten to know the country a little more seriously, and there's been sort of more nuance to how I think about that. And that's something else I'm trying to formulate in a script that needs to get out one of these days. What was I going to say? So what is interesting about that? I've clearly been doing this for 2 hours and 40 minutes. What is interesting is this story from September. So what's kind of crazy, what's been going on in the United States, financially speaking, is with the stock market. It's gone insane. This is another thing. I've got a script I've been developing on, which makes no sense at all. The U.S. economy has been damaged massively. The world economy has been damaged massively. And the U.S. stock market is not, I think it is periodically hitting highs that are the highest they've hit, since, Trump came to office. And in tech specifically, it has hit dramatic new highs. I think I've talked about how, like, the top 5 tech companies in the United States are now larger than the Japanese stock market, and then they surpassed the entire European stock markets combined. It is fucking insane. And what's interesting, and the reason this has something to do with Saudi Arabia, is on September 4th, it was acknowledged, of course, none of the news stories actually connected this back, that actually this insane tech bubble, which is still ongoing, was inflated by Maya Soshi's son of SoftBank, which folks who've been paying attention to my rants for quite some time know that Son and SoftBank are the folks that are funded by Saudi Arabia to the tune of $50 billion. This is where Saudi Arabia is, well, I have always argued it was pissing away its money, was by giving Son all this money. And I think when the crash comes, we will find out the horrific extent to which Saudi Arabia's money has been pissed away. But it really is kind of crazy that, I don't know if anybody other than me on this who's listening right now has, like, retirement accounts and investments, like, it's really fascinating the extent to which this Japanese banker and the Saudi royal family have inflated absolutely everybody's retirement accounts and investments in the United States and abroad. If they do that, actually, is that that absolutely functions to help Donald Trump, which is fascinating. But yeah, it's just extraordinary. And Um, you can't keep. I was on NPR. I was listening. It's the classic like NPR. Listening on NPR to like classic Keynes quote. Lord John Maynard Keynes. Lord Keynes was he? I don't know. Maybe it's something else. But famous British economist who sort of pointed out. Well, the fact that I think is, if something's unsustainable, this is somebody else. It will stop. It can't go on forever. But what is it? What is the Keynes quote? Is something like, "You can go broke before things get rational," or no, it's oh damn it. But regardless, yeah, I mean, these things can go on longer than you might think. As well, I'm glad I picked the 2030 date for Saudi Arabia's fall. It's thus far successful, somewhat, despite extraordinary failures like WeWork and Tesla. The inflation of U.S. tech assets that Saudi Arabia is very much undertaking has kind of worked so far. So it's kind of fascinating and horrifying and just fucking crazy the amount of money we're talking about in terms of market manipulation. And yeah, I own Tesla stocks. I've benefited from this as well. So yeah, it's fucking weird, but that's the world we live in. And I wanted to finish on a more optimistic note. And I don't think I'm going to do. I think Noah, No Opinion on Twitter was pushing this, was why I've sort of found myself into it, or someone else. But it really is kind of extraordinary. What I don't know what it was I was reading, it sort of pointed out that like in Europe and the United States, the decades after World War II were infinitely problematic, this, that, and the other thing, but were extraordinary economically speaking. And there were some extraordinary economic eras prior to that, in the 1850s, the 1890s. But I think across Europe and the United States, and in some other places that could benefit from that, in the 50s, 60s, and into the 70s in some cases, the French call it the Trente Glorieuses. Japanese economic miracle was happening. Just an extraordinary, broad-based, incredibly massive increase in the economy. And what's key, not Japan, well, to an extent, Japan, but like what's key is includes developed countries, like fully, not just Chinese economic miracles, but like the United States and Europe, which since the early 20th century were sort of the leading developed economies in the world, experienced this incredible. And what a lot of people have been pointing out recently is that what ended this was, I mean, what was blamed for this was state planning, and things got too sclerotic, and entrepreneurs. And as without many things, it can be many things. It can be many reasons. But what a lot of folks were saying was that actually a great contributor to this, that isn't as acknowledged as it ought to be, was the fact that energy became expensive. If you look at oil prices from the sort of, I guess, from the 20s until the 70s, real scarcity sort of happened in the 70s. And through solar, through efficiency, through the development of oil resources, oil and gas resources everywhere, we've been struggling massively to deal with that point in the 70s where everyone woke up and were like, oh, holy shit, like oil's expensive now. Energy's more expensive than it was through this 30 glorious years of development. And since we started using it in the 1880s, like, and what's kind of crazy is like thinking about, I think it's dawning on people how cheap and how useful solar and wind have become. And it's dawning on more and more people like, holy shit, like, we'll never, like, it's not technically feasible now or imaginable to have 100%, completely 100% wind and solar power. But 10 years ago, it wasn't feasible or imaginable to have 5% wind and solar power. So people are realizing, oh wow, like we can really like beat climate change this decade. We can really, it's really possible to do the energy transition. If you don't believe in climate change, then okay, you can make it so petrostates don't matter anymore. That sounds pretty fucking great. A world without the international influence of Saudi Arabia, Iran, and a much healthier international influence from Russia, the United States, and Iran. Actually, Saudi Arabia is just going to disappear because countries are healthier when they're not in hock to petrobarons, as is the case for the United States as well. That's a better world, even if you don't believe in climate change. So that's one thing that people are realizing. But actually, people are going beyond it to be like, wait, holy shit! Like the rates at which this stuff is improving, and now like the batteries are getting smaller and they're getting denser and they're getting more powerful. Like, are we getting to a point where like 5 to 10 years from now, like we're gonna go back to the way it was before the 60s when we had unlimited energy and we could there's a real possibility that something happened in the 70s that made it harder for economic growth to happen everywhere in the world. Made it more difficult and screwed things up. And it's possible that over the next 10, 15 years, we could see those fetters, those chains that resource constraints around oil and gas put on us. We could see them removed entirely. Well, that's pretty fucking cool. Like that's where you start start thinking about just science fiction shit. Singularity, I think, is a term that has fallen out of as the singularity has continued to fail to happen. People have talked about it less, but so that's energy is super fucking exciting right now. I was listening to some podcast where it's like artificial intelligence, which everybody's supposed to care about, is just horse shit. We're all envisioning Terminator and robots with personalities, and it's a joke. Like the more serious you are about the threat or revolutionary nature of alternative intelligence you are, it means the less time you've actually spent studying alternative. Have I forgotten what AI stands for? Artificial intelligence. Jesus, I've been doing this for almost 3 hours. Artificial intelligence is something that if you actually work on it, you're like, oh yeah, we're nowhere near independent thinking machines. But actually, what is, I think, the thing for the next 10, 15 years is sort of alternative energy. And it's like potentially extraordinarily revolutionary, like sci-fi singularity shit. And that's pretty fucking cool, I think. So anyway, so that's it. Okay. Do we have any comments, final comments? I've been doing this. I'm amazed that there are 11 people who are watching this. If you are here as not a patron, as you have, unfairly, gotten a link to this, well, I'm very disappointed in you. And I'm happy to have you here. I think what's important to me about these patron things is that they be available to patrons, and that they be small. That I'm able to have a conversation with the folks here. I do not think, if you as a patron want to share this with one friend, that's fine. I do not think it's a good thing if this is getting posted on, the individual link is getting posted on message boards or something like that. So it would be nice if we could avoid that in future. However, like, hey man, like this was fun. It was good to bloviate for about 3 hours on some stuff. And I'm tremendously grateful to everybody for being here. Oh, now we have comments. Okay. I'm here for the patrons. Okay. Salman Siddiqui says a whole new meaning to Vision 2030. Is that talking about the tax fraud or the holy shit? We've got some kind of singularity happening. Anyway, either way. Fadel says, is COVID-19 the end of Europe, except for Germany, being seen as a serious player on the world stage? I think it is. No, I think France is still, France is fascinating because especially when I was more like stridently neoliberal or conservative leaning, it was always like fucking France is, they're stupid and socialist and dirigist, and they're just falling, fading, yada yada. But then they just keep being a big deal, and their economy is okay. And my understanding is they have better demographics than anybody else in the continent, and France just keeps on being France, and that's fine. The UK absolutely is going to go through a tremendous plummet in is going through tremendous plummet in international standing, economic importance, et cetera. Regardless, I mean, it's still going to be 60 million native speakers with a lot of wealth built up over centuries. They're not going to become irrelevant. I think that what COVID is going to is going as a process that COVID is going to push further forward, is pushing further forward. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with the German Constitutional Court? I have not been following that to the extent that it should. But the fact that the EU is taking on debt to support everybody is a step forward in, the EU actually becoming a thing. So COVID could, in fact, be a thing, something that helps bring to fruition a lot of the potential of Europe. But yeah, as far as individual European countries, I mean, nothing is going to be the thing that destroys it forever. Like, what's extraordinary is like realizing when I read Adam Tooze's Crashed, which is a long, detailed, and fascinating and essential, not essential, but just extraordinarily useful book. I hadn't really appreciated the extent to which 2008 was bad for the United States. 2008 wiped out Europe. I think I may have talked about that in the China. No, I talked about that recently in the "If China Was Smart" video. I talked about the way that 2008 wiped out Europe's banks. Europe's banks used to be competitive with Japanese and American banks, and in some cases larger, and they're not anymore. Like Europe doesn't have world-beating companies anymore. So yeah, I think like as individual European countries, I think Europe still hasn't emerged from the 2008 financial crisis. So yeah, but I think what may help the emergence of Europe, the European Union, as the world power it was promised to be, and I believe should be, could be helped by COVID-19. I think you're absolutely right to point out that like the traditional individual powers, Britain, France, Russia, yeah, even Germany, actually, Italy, that were supposedly seen as big deals or great powers or whatever. Yeah, it's an ongoing process of their diminishment. I think potentially COVID could get more people in Europe to notice that that's happening, which would put more power behind actually consolidating Europe, actually turning Europe into a world power. So it's a mixed thing. But for sure, I mean, every big crisis, hurts the incumbents more, especially the incumbents that are sort of on borrowed time or fragile footings. And I think that if you're a country that's not growing in population size anymore, that's absolutely the case. No matter how no matter how consistently India fails to get its shit together, I do firmly believe that as this 21st century wears on, it is consolidation and big units that are going to matter and matter more. So the European Union is a big fucking unit and is important, and because of its wealth, is more important if it can function together than China or India. Individually, I mean, we're going to begin to be getting to points where, I mean, by midway through the century, towards the end of the century, we're going to be getting. I mean, Ethiopia is going to have the same, claim to being a world power that Italy or France does. That's an end of the century kind of thing. But the EU, if it ever gets its shit together, and I'm beginning to think it will be the bigger deal. Anyway, thoughts on nanobots? Wow. Nope. Not currently. Hey, Rob. I know we moved on from Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, Turkey discussion, but I also wanted to add one other thing. I don't hear often about the assassination of 30 plus Turkish diplomats around the world, some along with their families by Aslan Jekag. Yes, that's a really good point. That's a really fucked up thing that happened. Yeah, so the most of the, I think, triumvirate that, or at least Talat Pasha, the folks that did the Armenian genocide, were assassinated by Armenians within 10 years of 1915, which is real hard to complain about. What is not hard to complain about is that into the 70s, I don't know much about this, but Mert is really, really correct to call attention to this, was that Armenian terrorist groups, 50 or 60 years after the Armenian genocide, were assassinating Turkish politicians, Turkish diplomats. It's a deeply fucked up thing that I unfortunately know almost nothing about. So I can't speak to it. I don't know if these people that were assassinated had some plausible attachment to the genocide, because by the 1970s, you know, that's impossible. So yeah, I don't know. Is it just because they weren't admitting the genocide had happened? I don't know enough about that. I think that's a good point. But yeah, that's totally a thing that happened. Yeah, like Armenian terrorists assassinating Turkish diplomats 50 or 60 years after the genocide. No bueno. Don't know enough about it, unfortunately. Scott Locke says, UN does wonderful work with hunger, refugees, disease. Good topic for a future video. That's a very good point. I need to talk more. You know, I had that series where it was like, we need a globalist party. And I did like 3 installments of, there's so much more that I need to do, Scott. I know this. I need to finish reading more books. And I got like 3 Trump videos I want to get out before this fucker is hopefully done with. And Yemen videos that I owe you. And Sudan. God, I was going to do a series on Sudan. I barely read 1 book. Anyway, yeah, a lot that needs to be done, Scott. I agree. Fado asks, have you seen Roma and There Will Be Blood? Yes, I've seen both of those. Roma's the Mexican film about the woman who's doing domestic service in the filmmaker's childhood home. I think that was extraordinary. Really, I think brought home just how tumultuous Mexican history has been long before the Narcos. Because I think it sort of covers the 70s and sort of fascist militias. Really extraordinary book. Film, well worth seeing. I think that's on Netflix for free everywhere, right? I think isn't that a Netflix proper? So if you have not seen Roma, you should see it. There Will Be Blood is that's the famous Daniel Day-Lewis oil guy thing, right? I feel like that is a film that is, you know, beloved of a lot of folks, and I'm just, I don't know, that director, I find I often am just sort of like I find as I get older I have a lot less tolerance for high-toned dude movies. I just want to be entertained. I just want some nice low-tone explosions. I don't know, but yeah, There Will Be Blood is a beloved movie that I have not really enjoyed so much. Roma is fantastic though. Solomon Segedi is, the shift to renewable energy could be put back by another recession. Countries looking to bounce back may rely on readily available oil and gas. I agree completely. However, what's fucking fantastic, and a reason why I remain an Elon Musk fan, even if he makes really unpardonable jokes about Bolivia, is that you know, he's made it sexy. He's cracked the code. And you know what? His insane Twitter presence may very well be part of it. So yeah, my expectation, and I think the expectation of a lot of people, was that I'm slowly to educate myself more. I'm slowly working my way through episodes of Chris Nelder's Energy Transition podcast. The first 30 episodes of which, going back to 2015, 2016, I believe, are free. And it's extraordinarily nerdy, and like, just he'll have somebody on and be like, let's talk about load rates and capitation fees or whatever the fuck it is. And I have no idea what he's talking about half the time, but I think it's very helpful. And what's interesting is that
5 years back, this Chris Nelder guy is very much an advocate for energy transition and green shit generally. It's like, well, the oil prices are definitely they're going to go back up. They're going to go back up. I swear they're going to go back up, because you can tell in his voice he's terrified that if the oil prices don't go back up, then solar and everything's fucked. But I think because of a possibly excessive but very successful marketing of the idea that climate apocalypse is coming. I do believe climate change is real. I do believe it is fucking up the world as we speak, and I do believe we need to do something about it. I do not believe that human life is going to end in 10 years if we don't do something about it. But I think that idea has been really instantiated, really been put into the minds of a lot of people. And I think there's been a very effective just sort of mental model building process that has led us to a point where even if it doesn't make economic sense, people are going to buy electric cars. And what's fucking fantastic is that, because I think largely due to, it's to some extent Obama's subsidies, but I think much more German subsidies, the Energiewende. I'm not talking about electric cars here. I'm talking more about wind and solar. Like, we've gotten to a point where wind, solar, electric cars, like this whole complex of technologies, even if oil prices never go up again, they're getting cheaper than oil prices. Wind and solar are cheaper than coal everywhere in the world now. And 10 years ago, that sounded like fucking science fiction. There are caveats to that, of course. Like, yeah, but what does that mean for intermittency? What does that mean for providing that base load that coal and gas can provide that maybe solar and wind can't currently provide? Yeah, that's a real problem. And batteries deal with it. And batteries are now like 5 years behind, but doing the same process that wind and solar did. Like, it's just fucking crazy. Like, I do think that, like, even though there is some, put on my old timey conservative hat, there is some, some excessive panic and a little bit of fraudulence in some description of this impending panic with climate change or whatnot. It's been very effective. And we're going to see like the end of most petrostates, in the next couple decades. And I'm okay with that. So I don't know. Okay, right. Yeah, Alfonso Cuarón made Roma. Paul Thomas Anderson made There Will Be Blood, which is, a standard great movie. You should sit down and appreciate. And I'm just too old and tired for it. I can't watch movies anymore. I find that a lot of people say that social media has kept them from being able to read books. I think because I've very consciously warred against that. That is not the case. I think over the past 3 months, I've read, 12, 15 books, some of them 1,000 pages long. Is a very conscious. I mean, that's what my job is. My job is to read books, learn things about the world, and talk about them on the internet. So I read books, but I can't fucking watch movies anymore, man. Like, I can watch like an hour and a half stupid slasher movie if it's like real flashy. I watched the Babysitter films on Netflix for a lot of fun. But yeah, like sitting down and appreciating even TV shows. I watched like first half of the OA on Netflix. And was like, holy shit, like this is like most prestige television is just fucking soap operas. It's just pretty soap operas. The OA was like, I was like, oh, this is like a real piece of art. This is extraordinary. This is worth appreciating and consuming. And yeah, that was 6 months ago, and I'm still halfway through the first season. Like, it's just, yeah, I don't have the attention span to watch things anymore. And that was even before like I became a full-time Twitter addict. Yeah. So yeah, There Will Be Blood is definitely a movie that's just a little too high-minded for me nowadays. I reserve my mental capacity for books and Twitter, unfortunately. Anyway, Jesus Christ, it's been 3 hours. But yeah, I love you guys. You are what keeps me going. I'm very grateful to patrons. You guys are the bestest. Heck, if you have a friend who you think might want to become a patron and you want to give them the link to the next one of the one we do next month and see if they enjoy this sort of interaction and might want to chip in $1 or $2 a video, that'd be great. Because I am not making enough money. I'm living in my parents' summer house, and I'm 40, which is fucking fine for COVID. Yeah, there's really not much of a point in trying to live in a city and meet a girl. Yeah, I need to make more money. So yeah, if you want to
selectively invite a friend to these patrons only chats in the hopes that they might contribute. That'd be great. Yeah, thanks. I don't really need to spiel. You guys know the deal. And I'm super grateful for you all. And I'm out. Thanks so much. I'm so tired.